The moment Victoria Hale's heart stopped beating, her husband started counting her money. 30 years old, CEO of a tech empire, bleeding out on a hospital bed after giving birth. The doctors called her time of death while she screamed silently inside her own paralyzed body, fully conscious, completely trapped, utterly helpless. Then she heard her husband's mistress laughing in the hallway. This is the story of the woman they buried alive, the babies they tried to steal, and the revenge that came from beyond the grave. Drop a comment with your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stay until the end, because you won't believe what happens when a mother everyone thought was dead opens her eyes. The contraction started during the board meeting. Victoria Hale felt the first one grip her abdomen like a vice while presenting third-quarter projections to 17 stone-faced investors who had collectively bet $400 million on her vision. She was explaining cloud infrastructure scalability when her water broke all over the Herman Miller chair. "Gentlemen," she said, standing slowly as amniotic fluid pooled on the polished concrete floor, "I'm going to need to reschedule the rest of this discussion." One of the venture capitalists, some Stanford grad barely old enough to rent a car, actually started to protest. Victoria silenced him with a look that had made grown men reconsider their career choices. "My assistant will send revised projections by end of day," she continued, gathering her laptop and phone with hands that had started trembling. "Unless any of you would like to deliver this baby yourselves, I suggest we adjourn." She made it to the elevator before the second contraction hit. Daniel met her in this parking garage, 30 minutes late, smelling like cigarettes and cheap perfume that definitely wasn't the Chanel she'd bought him for Christmas. His Tesla was parked crooked across 2 spaces. "You're smoking again," Victoria said through gritted teeth as another wave of pain rolled through her. "Jesus, Vic, is now really the time?" Daniel threw her overnight bag into the trunk with unnecessary force. "I dropped everything to get here. You were supposed to be at the office. It's 2 in the afternoon. I had a meeting off-site." "With who?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Does it matter? Get in the car." The drive to Seattle Presbyterian took 23 minutes through downtown traffic. Victoria timed her contractions on her phone, 4 minutes apart, lasting 90 seconds each. She'd read every pregnancy book published in the last decade. She knew what the numbers meant. This baby was coming fast. "Did you call your mother?" Victoria asked. "She's already at the hospital." "Great." Victoria leaned her head against the window. "Exactly what I need right now." She's excited to meet her grandchild. She's excited to have leverage over me for the next 18 years. Daniel's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. "Can you not do this? Can we have one family moment that doesn't turn into you attacking my mother?" "Your mother told the Seattle Times I was an unfit parent before I'd even gotten pregnant. She gave an interview, Daniel, about our private medical decisions. She was taken out of context. The direct quote was, 'Career women make absent mothers.' There's not a lot of context that makes that better." They spent the rest of the drive in silence. Evelyn Cross waited in the hospital lobby like a designer-clad vulture, perfectly coiffed silver hair, Hermes scarf, shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She'd married into old Seattle money and never let anyone forget it. "Victoria, darling," Evelyn's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You look stressed." "I'm in labor." "Yes, well, these things are so much easier when you're younger. I had Daniel at 24, barely broke a sweat." She turned to her son. "The private suite is ready. I've arranged for Dr. Hammond to oversee everything personally." Victoria had specifically requested Dr. Chen, a no-nonsense OB with 20 years of high-risk delivery experience. Dr. Hammond was Evelyn's golf buddy who spent more time at charity galas than operating rooms. "I want Dr. Chen," Victoria said. "Dr. Hammond is the best in the city," Evelyn countered smoothly. "I've already made the arrangements. This is my delivery. And this is my grandchild." Daniel stepped between them. "Mom, let Vic have her doctor." Evelyn's expression hardened for just a fraction of a second before the pleasant mask slid back into place. "Of course. Whatever the mother wants." But when the nurse came to take Victoria to the delivery floor, Dr. Hammond was the one waiting in the suite. The labor lasted 16 hours. For the first 8, Victoria walked the halls, bounced on an exercise ball, tried every position the doula suggested. Daniel sat in the corner scrolling through his phone, occasionally glancing up when she made too much noise. Can you not do that? She snapped during hour 9, when the contractions had become a continuous wave of agony. Do what? Be on your phone while I'm trying to push a human being out of my body. Daniel sighed and pocketed the device. You're the one who wanted natural childbirth. I wanted you to be present. I am present. I've been here the whole time. Physically, your mind is somewhere else. Where else would my mind be? Victoria wanted to scream. Instead, she breathed through another contraction and wished she'd married someone who understood the difference between showing up and actually being there. By hour 12, she'd accepted the epidural. By hour 14, her blood pressure had started climbing. By hour 15, monitors were beeping and nurses were moving faster, and Dr. Hammond's expression had shifted from confident to concerned. What's wrong? Victoria asked, but her voice sounded far away. Your blood pressure is elevated, Dr. Hammond said. We're monitoring the situation. How elevated? Let's focus on getting this baby delivered. That was when Victoria knew something was very wrong. Medical professionals only deflected like that when they were trying not to cause panic. She'd sat through enough corporate crisis meetings to recognize damage control. Another contraction hit, harder than the others. Victoria grabbed the bed rail and pushed with everything she had. That's it, Dr. Hammond said. One more push. Victoria bore down, feeling like her body was tearing in half, and then suddenly there was pressure and release and the unmistakable sound of a baby crying. It's a girl, someone said. Victoria tried to see her daughter, but her vision was blurring at the edges. The room felt too bright, too loud. Everything was moving in slow motion. Let me hold her, Victoria whispered. In just a moment, a nurse said. We need to clean her up. But Victoria could hear the tension in the woman's voice. Something was happening that they weren't telling her. The beeping got louder. Someone shouted for more doctors. Daniel stood frozen in the corner, staring at the baby, instead of at his wife, who was bleeding out on the table. Victoria felt warmth spreading beneath her, too much warmth. She looked down and saw crimson soaking through the sheets. I'm hemorrhaging, she said calmly. Somewhere in her analytical brain, the part that had built a tech empire from nothing, she cataloged the symptoms. Excessive bleeding, dizziness, rapid heartbeat, postpartum hemorrhage, likely uterine atony or retained placenta. She was going to die. The thought arrived with surprising clarity. Daniel, she called out, but he wasn't looking at her. He was watching the nurses clean their daughter, making sure the baby was perfect, probably already calculating how much easier life would be as a widower with full control of Victoria's company shares. The edges of her vision started going dark. More doctors rushed in, hands pressed against her abdomen. Someone was saying her name, but it sounded like they were underwater. Victoria Hale, 30-year-old CEO, self-made millionaire, Fortune 40 under 40 honoree, felt her heart stutter in her chest. The last thing she heard before everything went black was Evelyn's voice in the hallway, cold and calculating. How much does she have in life insurance? Victoria woke up in hell. Except she didn't wake up. Not really. She existed in a space between consciousness and oblivion, trapped inside a body that had become a prison. Her eyes wouldn't open, her mouth wouldn't move. Her lungs breathed on their own through a machine that whooshed and clicked with mechanical precision. But her mind was screaming. She could hear everything. The steady beep of monitors, the shuffle of nurses' shoes on linoleum, hushed conversations in the hallway about poor Mr. Cross and such a tragedy, and at least the baby survived. Baby, singular. Victoria tried to move her hand, her finger, anything. Nothing responded. It was like being buried alive in her own flesh. Time of death, 11:47 p.m., she heard Dr. Hammond say. No, I'm not dead. I'm right here. I can hear you. But her vocal cords might as well have been made of stone. Someone should call the family, a nurse said softly. The husband is already here. He's with the baby in the NICU. With the baby. Not with me. Not sitting beside his wife's body, not holding her hand, not grief-stricken and devastated. With the baby. Victoria heard footsteps approach. A hand touched her arm, checking for a pulse. Finding none. Probably. Her heart had stopped. They'd said so. But somehow she was still here, still aware, still trapped inside this nightmare. Poor thing, the nurse murmured. Only 30. Whole life ahead of her. Except I'm not dead, Victoria wanted to scream. I'm locked in. It's called locked-in syndrome. I read about it in a medical journal 3 months ago. My heart stopped, but my brain is fine. I'm conscious. I'm aware. I'm here. No sound came out. The nurse adjusted something on one of the machines and walked away. Darkness pressed in from all sides. Victoria existed in a void where time had no meaning. Minutes could have been hours. Hours could have been days. Then she heard Evelyn's voice, sharp and clear, just outside the door. I've already contacted our attorney. We need to move quickly on the estate paperwork. Mom, she just died. That was Daniel, but he didn't sound grief-stricken. He sounded tired, annoyed. And she died without a will, which means everything goes into probate unless we act fast. The company shares alone are worth $40 million. Then there's the life insurance, the penthouse, the investment portfolio. Can we maybe wait until she's cold before we start dividing up her assets? Don't be naive, Daniel. You have a daughter to think about now. This is about securing her future. Silence. Then Daniel. How much are we talking total? Victoria's silent scream echoed in the prison of her skull. They were discussing her net worth while her body was still warm on the hospital bed. Not grieving, not devastated, calculating. Conservatively, 70, maybe 80 million once everything is liquidated, Evelyn said. But we need to move fast. Her parents will contest everything if we give them the chance. They don't even know yet. Exactly. We tell them tomorrow after you've signed the initial paperwork. They're in Florida. They can't get here for at least 2 days. That gives us time to secure the important assets. What about the company? The board won't just hand me control. They will if you're the grieving widower with a newborn to support. Play it right, Daniel. Cry at the press conference. Talk about carrying on Victoria's legacy. They'll eat it up. This couldn't be happening. This was a nightmare. Victoria would wake up and Daniel would be holding her hand and Evelyn would be nowhere near her hospital room and none of this would be real. But she didn't wake up. She stayed trapped, listening as her husband and mother-in-law planned how to profit from her death. There's one complication, Daniel said quietly. What? Sophie. Sophie Lang. Victoria's executive assistant. 26 years old, ambitious, always staying late at the office, always volunteering for business trips, always finding reasons to text Daniel about urgent matters that were never actually urgent. Victoria had suspected for months, but suspecting and knowing were different things. What about her? Evelyn's voice had gone cold. She's going to expect things. Now that Vic is gone, absolutely not. You will end whatever this is immediately. I can't just, yes, you can. You're a grieving widower, Daniel. Your image is everything right now. One whiff of an affair and you lose all public sympathy. The board will turn on you. The media will destroy you. And you can kiss that inheritance goodbye. Sophie won't stay quiet. Then make sure she understands what she has to lose. Offer her money, a promotion, whatever it takes. But she doesn't come anywhere near you until the estate is settled and enough time has passed that it looks respectable. Victoria heard footsteps approaching her room. She wanted to scream, to thrash, to do anything to signal that she was still conscious, but her body remained frozen. The door opened. Is she really gone? Daniel asked. The heart stopped, brain activity ceased. She's gone. That was a lie. Victoria's brain was very much active. She was conscious, aware, trapped, but present. Daniel walked to the bedside. Victoria felt his presence, sensed him standing over her. Did she suffer? He asked. The hemorrhage was catastrophic. She likely lost consciousness quickly. More lies. Victoria had been conscious through every second of the bleeding, the panic, the realization that she was dying while her husband stood in the corner worrying about the baby instead of her. Good, Daniel said quietly. Victoria's silent heart broke. Not, I'll miss her, or I loved her, or even, I'm sorry. Just good that she hadn't suffered. Relief that her death had been quick and convenient. I need to check on the baby, Daniel said. He walked out without another word. Evelyn lingered. Well, she said to Victoria's motionless body, I can't say I'll miss you. You were always too controlling, too demanding. Daniel deserves better. She adjusted something on the bedside table, probably the flowers she'd brought for appearances, and left. Victoria floated in darkness, conscious but helpless, aware but paralyzed. This was worse than death. This was being erased while still existing. Time became meaningless. Victoria drifted in and out of awareness, sometimes catching fragments of conversation, sometimes hearing nothing but the rhythmic whoosh of the ventilator keeping her lungs functioning. She learned to track the passage of days by the nursing shifts. The morning nurse hummed off key while checking vitals. The afternoon nurse talked to patients even though they couldn't respond. The night nurse worked in silence. 3 days passed, then 4. Victoria heard Daniel's voice periodically, always brief, always performative when other people were in the room. "I miss her so much," he'd say to visitors. Then, alone with Evelyn in the hallway, "When can we pull the plug? This is costing a fortune in hospital bills." "We can't look too eager," Evelyn cautioned. "Give it 2 weeks. Then we start talking about letting her go with dignity." On day 5, Victoria heard a new voice. "Daniel, I'm so sorry for your loss." Sophie Lang. "Thanks for coming," Daniel said. Victoria screamed silently. Her assistant, her employee, the woman she'd mentored and promoted, was here, in the hospital where her body lay in a coma. "How are you holding up?" Sophie asked, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's been hard. The baby keeps me going." "She's beautiful. I saw the photos you posted. You should come by the penthouse, meet her properly." No. "I don't know if that's appropriate," Sophie said, but Victoria could hear the smile in her voice. "Vic would have wanted you to be part of our lives. You were like family to her." Lies. Victoria had been planning to fire Sophie the week before going on maternity leave. She'd found irregularities in expense reports, discovered Sophie had been taking credit for Victoria's work in meetings she wasn't invited to. "Maybe next week," Sophie said, "after things settle down." "Tomorrow," Daniel said. "Come for dinner. I could use the company." Victoria listened to them make plans to have dinner in her home, with her baby, while her body lay motionless 3 floors below. On day 7, she heard Evelyn and Daniel arguing in whispered tones outside her door. "The life insurance company is asking questions," Evelyn hissed. "What kind of questions?" "About the circumstances of her death. They're saying hemorrhage in a healthy 30-year-old is unusual. They want an investigation." "She had complications. It happens." "They're implying medical malpractice. If they prove negligence, the hospital pays, not them. We get nothing. Dr. Hammond is your friend. He'll say whatever we need." "He's already covering his ass. He's claiming he did everything by the book." Victoria filed that information away. Dr. Hammond, Evelyn's hand-picked obstetrician, was now distancing himself from her death. Interesting. "What about the company?" Daniel asked. "The board meeting is next week. I've arranged for you to present as her widower, talk about preserving her vision, continuing her work, honoring her memory. Don't try to take control outright. Position yourself as a caretaker." "And Sophie? Has she been to the house yet?" "Twice." "You're an idiot." "Nobody knows. She parks 2 blocks away." "Someone always knows, Daniel. End it." "I will, after the estate settles." On day 9, Victoria heard her mother's voice. Patricia Hale had flown in from Jacksonville, probably on the first flight after being notified of her daughter's death. Victoria wanted to weep with relief. "Mom. Mom's here. Mom will know something is wrong. Mom will ask questions." "I want to see her," Patricia said. "She's already been cremated." That was Evelyn, her voice smooth as silk. Daniel thought it would be easier given the circumstances. Cremated. They told her mother she'd been cremated. "Without consulting me." Patricia's voice shook with fury. "Without letting me say goodbye?" It was Daniel's decision as her husband. He thought a quick, private ceremony would be best. "Where are her ashes?" "Being prepared for a memorial service next month." All lies. Victoria was right here, 3 floors up, hooked to machines, trapped in her own body while they lied to her mother's face. "I want to see my granddaughter," Patricia said. "Of course. Daniel will arrange a visit." Victoria heard her mother's footsteps retreat down the hallway, heard her crying softly, probably being comforted by Victoria's father. They thought she was dead, gone, already cremated. Her own parents had been robbed of the chance to say goodbye, to sit with her, to be present while she was still, technically, alive. On day 12, Sophie moved into the penthouse. Victoria heard Daniel bragging about it to a friend on the phone. She's great with the baby, natural mother material, way better than Vic ever would have been. That hurt more than the physical paralysis. Victoria had spent 9 months reading parenting books, planning nursery designs, researching the best developmental toys. She'd interviewed 17 nannies before finding one she trusted. She'd created spreadsheets for feeding schedules and vaccination timelines. And now Sophie Lang, who'd never mentioned wanting children, who'd once said babies were career killers, was playing house with Victoria's daughter. On day 15, Victoria heard Evelyn mention something that made her blood run cold. The hospital called. There's an issue with the birth certificate. What kind of issue? Apparently there was confusion during the delivery. They're saying there might have been irregularities in the documentation. What does that mean? I don't know. They want us to come in for a meeting. The conversation moved away before Victoria could hear more. Irregularities in the birth certificate. What did that mean? On day 16, Victoria learned the truth. Dr. Chen, the obstetrician Victoria had originally requested, came to check on her. Victoria heard her speaking quietly with the night nurse. This poor woman, I reviewed her chart. The hemorrhage was preventable. Dr. Hammond was overseeing the delivery. Dr. Hammond missed all the warning signs. Her blood pressure had been climbing for 2 hours before the hemorrhage. Any competent physician would have ordered a C-section. Will there be an investigation? The family hasn't requested one. The husband seems eager to move on. Of course he was. Dr. Chen approached the bed. Victoria felt a hand on her wrist, checking her pulse. I wish I'd been there, Dr. Chen said softly. I would have fought for you. The doctor left. Victoria existed in rage and helplessness. On day 18, everything changed. A different doctor came to examine her. Male voice, unfamiliar, all business. I'm Dr. Morrison, neurology. I've been asked to evaluate this patient for brain death certification so the family can proceed with organ donation. Organ donation. They were going to harvest her organs. Victoria tried to scream, to move, to do anything. Nothing happened. Dr. Morrison performed a series of tests, shining lights in her eyes, checking reflexes, touching her face. Pupils reactive, he murmured. That's unusual for someone declared brain dead. He did more tests. I'm seeing some anomalous responses here. Let me run a full EEG. Victoria focused every ounce of her consciousness on trying to send a signal, any signal, that she was aware. Move, move, move. Nothing. Interesting, Dr. Morrison said. There's definitely neural activity here, more than I'd expect. What does that mean? The nurse asked. It means this patient might not be as gone as everyone thinks. Hope surged through Victoria's paralyzed body. I'm ordering a full neurological workup, Dr. Morrison continued, and I'm placing a hold on any organ donation until we know exactly what we're dealing with. The family won't be happy. The family doesn't get to decide medical protocols. If there's even a chance this patient has awareness, we have an ethical obligation to investigate. Dr. Morrison left to make arrangements. Victoria floated in cautious hope. Someone suspected. Someone was asking questions. But would it be enough? On day 20, at 3:47 in the morning, Victoria heard shouting in the hallway. What do you mean there's another baby? That was Daniel's voice, shocked and angry. There was a twin, a nurse explained, born immediately after the first infant. In the chaos of the hemorrhage, the second birth wasn't properly documented. She's been in the NICU. For 3 weeks? And nobody told me? We tried to contact you multiple times. The calls went to voicemail. I never got any messages. Sir, we have records of 6 attempted contacts. Daniel had ignored calls about his second daughter because he was too busy moving his mistress into the penthouse and planning how to spend his dead wife's money. Is she healthy? Daniel asked. Perfectly healthy. She's ready to be discharged. I don't want her. Silence. Sir? I have 1 baby. That's enough. Put the second one up for adoption. Victoria's silent scream echoed through the void. Mr. Cross, you can't simply abandon. She's not mine. Run a paternity test. We already did, for medical records. Both children are biologically yours. Then my wife must have had an affair. I want nothing to do with this child. He was lying, making up excuses. He simply didn't want the complication of twins. 1 baby made him look sympathetic. 2 made him look suspicious. "I'll discuss this with my mother," Daniel said. "Don't do anything until I call you back." 6 hours later, Victoria heard Evelyn and Daniel outside her door. "A twin complicates everything," Evelyn said, "so we give it up for adoption." Adoption agencies ask questions, do background checks. If anyone discovers you're trying to get rid of one twin while keeping the other, it looks suspicious. "So what do we do?" Evelyn's voice dropped to barely a whisper, but Victoria heard every word. "I know someone. A private arrangement. No paperwork. No questions. They pay cash for healthy infants." "You're talking about selling my daughter." "I'm talking about solving a problem discreetly." Victoria's heart monitor started beeping erratically. The nurse rushed in. "Her vitals are spiking, heart rate elevated, blood pressure climbing." "What does that mean?" "It means she's responding to stimulus, emotional stimulus." "She's brain dead," Evelyn snapped. "Her chart says she's under evaluation. Dr. Morrison placed a hold on the brain death certification." The monitor kept beeping as Victoria's body responded to the horror of what she'd heard. They were going to sell her baby, sell her daughter to strangers for cash. The nurse studied the monitors. "I'm calling Dr. Morrison. These responses aren't consistent with someone in a vegetative state." "She's dying," Daniel said. "Her body is shutting down. Everyone knows it." "I know what I'm seeing, Mr. Cross, and I'm documenting every anomaly." Evelyn grabbed Daniel's arm. "We should go." They left quickly. Victoria's monitors gradually calmed, but something had shifted. The nurse leaned close to Victoria's ear. "I don't know if you can hear me," she whispered, "but if you can, I'm going to make sure Dr. Morrison sees these readings. I'm going to make sure someone fights for you." Tears rolled down Victoria's paralyzed face. The nurse saw them. "Oh my God," she breathed. "You are in there." She grabbed Victoria's hand. "Squeeze if you can hear me. Just try. Anything." Victoria focused every atom of her being on her right hand. "Move. Squeeze. Show her." Nothing happened. The nurse waited. Then, impossibly, Victoria's pinky finger twitched. Just a millimeter, barely perceptible. But the nurse saw it. "I'm getting Dr. Morrison. Right now. Hold on. Just hold on." She ran from the room. Victoria existed in a state of desperate hope. 20 days of hell. 20 days trapped, listening to them plan to erase her, steal her children, divide her assets like she'd never existed. But someone saw her tears. Someone saw her finger move. Someone was fighting for her. On day 21, Dr. Morrison ran extensive tests. "This patient is exhibiting signs of locked-in syndrome," he told the assembled medical staff. "She's conscious, aware, completely paralyzed, but cognitively present." "That's impossible," Dr. Hammond argued. "She was declared dead." She was declared dead prematurely? Her heart stopped briefly due to hemorrhagic shock, but her brain never ceased functioning. She's been aware this entire time. The implications of that statement rippled through the room. "We need to inform the family," someone said. "We need to inform the police," Dr. Morrison corrected. "If this patient has been conscious, she may have information about irregularities in her medical care and in the handling of her estate." On day 22, detectives came to interview the medical staff. On day 23, they started investigating Daniel's financial transactions. On day 24, they discovered Sophie had moved into the penthouse. On day 25, they found evidence of the attempted illegal adoption arrangement. On day 26, they contacted Victoria's parents in Florida and told them their daughter was still alive. On day 27, Patricia and Robert Hale arrived at the hospital and sat beside their daughter's bed, holding her hands, talking to her, telling her to fight. On day 28, Victoria's right hand squeezed her mother's fingers. On day 29, at 11:23 p.m., Victoria's eyes opened. The first thing she saw was her mother's face, streaked with tears. The first thing she said, in a whisper barely audible, "My babies, both of them." Patricia sobbed and pressed the call button. Nurses rushed in. Dr. Morrison arrived. Victoria's parents called the police. And on day 30, at 9 a.m., Daniel Cross arrived at the hospital with legal papers to terminate life support. He walked into Victoria's room expecting to find a corpse. Instead, he found his wife sitting upright in bed, eyes open, very much alive. Behind him, 2 police officers stepped through the doorway. "Daniel Cross," one of them said, "you're under arrest." Victoria smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who'd spent 30 days in hell and had memorized every word, every plan, every betrayal. The smile of a CEO who'd built an empire and wasn't about to let anyone steal it. The smile of a mother who would burn the world down to protect her children. Daniel's face went white. Evelyn, standing in the hallway, grabbed the doorframe for support. And somewhere in the NICU, two baby girls slept peacefully, completely unaware that their mother had just come back from the dead. Daniel's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. No sound came out. His hand, still gripping the legal documents meant to end Victoria's life, trembled so violently the papers rustled. "There's been a mistake," he finally managed. "This isn't... She was conscious," Detective Sarah Martinez said, stepping fully into the room. Her partner, Detective James Park, positioned himself between Daniel and the door. "Mrs. Hale has been aware for the past 30 days, which means she heard everything." The color drained from Daniel's face, actually drained like someone had pulled a plug. He looked at Victoria, really looked at her for the first time since she'd hemorrhaged on the delivery table, and whatever he saw in her eyes made him take a step backward. "Vic, I can explain." "Don't!" Victoria's voice came out rough, damaged from weeks of intubation, but the word landed with the force of a slammed door. "Don't say my name. Don't try to explain. Just stand there and listen." Her mother squeezed her hand. Patricia Hale had aged 10 years in the past month, her face drawn and pale, but her grip was iron strong. Detective Martinez pulled out a recording device. "Mrs. Hale, are you willing to give a statement?" Victoria nodded. Speaking hurt. Everything hurt. Her throat felt like sandpaper, her muscles had atrophied from weeks of immobility, and her body was still recovering from the trauma of childbirth and hemorrhage. But pain was nothing compared to what she'd endured in the silence. "I heard everything," Victoria said, looking directly at Daniel. "Every conversation, every plan, every lie." "You were in a coma," Daniel said weakly. "The doctors said..." "Dr. Hammond said what your mother paid him to say. Dr. Morrison actually did his job." Victoria's laugh came out bitter. "Locked-in syndrome, rare but not impossible. Conscious awareness with complete paralysis. I was buried alive in my own body while you divided up my assets like I was already in the ground." Evelyn appeared in the doorway, took one look at the scene, and tried to back away. Detective Park caught her arm. "Mrs. Cross, we need you to stay." "I have nothing to say without my attorney." "Then call your attorney," Martinez said. "You're going to need one." Victoria watched her mother-in-law's carefully constructed mask crack. Evelyn Cross had spent 30 years perfecting the image of Seattle society matriarch, polished, poised, untouchable. Now she looked like exactly what she was, a woman who'd been caught planning to profit from murder. "Where's Sophie?" Victoria asked. Daniel flinched. She's at the penthouse," Detective Martinez said, consulting her notes. "We have officers bringing her in now, along with evidence of financial transactions, forged documents, and communication records between all three of you." "I want my daughters," Victoria said. "Both of them. Right now." A nurse appeared with a wheelchair. "Mrs. Hale, you're not strong enough to..." "I see. I've been lying in a bed for 30 days listening to people plan to sell my child. I'm strong enough." Victoria gripped the bedrail and tried to pull herself up. Her arms shook with the effort. Patricia moved to help, but Victoria waved her off. "I need to do this myself." It took 3 tries. Her legs barely supported her weight. But Victoria stood, swaying, holding the bedrail with white-knuckled determination. "The NICU is 2 floors down," the nurse said quietly. "I'll take you." Daniel made a move toward Victoria. Both detectives stepped in front of him. "Don't," Martinez warned. "Those are my daughters too," Daniel said. "You tried to sell one of them," Victoria said. Her voice had gone flat, emotionless. It was the tone she used in board meetings when firing executives who'd betrayed the company. "You told the hospital to put her up for adoption because having twins was inconvenient for your image. That's not what happened. I heard you." Each word came out clipped. "I heard you tell the nurse you didn't want her. I heard Evelyn suggest a private arrangement, cash for a healthy infant, no paperwork, no questions." Evelyn's face had gone gray. That conversation was taken out of context. "What context makes selling a baby acceptable?" Patricia demanded. Her southern accent, usually soft, had turned sharp as a blade. What context makes that anything but monstrous? Detective Park was writing everything down. Martinez had her hand on her service weapon, not threatening, just ready. "Mr. Cross, Mrs. Cross, you're both under arrest," Martinez said. "You have the right to remain silent." "On what charges?" Evelyn demanded. "For starters, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted child trafficking, filing false insurance claims, and we're still deciding on the rest." Martinez pulled out handcuffs. "Turn around." "This is absurd. We've done nothing wrong." "You told my parents I'd been cremated," Victoria said. "You moved your mistress into my home. You tried to steal my company. You planned to sell my daughter. Should I keep going?" The nurse helped Victoria into the wheelchair. Her legs gave out halfway down, muscles too weak to support her weight. She hated the weakness, hated needing help, but she'd spent 30 days unable to move at all. This was progress. "I'm coming with you," Patricia said. Victoria's father, Robert, stood in the corner looking lost. He was a quiet man, an engineer who'd never been comfortable with confrontation. Seeing his daughter nearly die, then learning she'd been conscious through weeks of horror, had broken something in him. "Dad," Victoria said softly. He crossed the room in 3 strides and hugged her carefully, like she might shatter. "My girl, my baby girl." "I'm okay. I'm here. They said you were gone. They said—" His voice cracked. "I know, but I'm not gone. I'm right here." Behind them, Martinez was reading Daniel his rights, while Park did the same for Evelyn. Both were arguing, demanding lawyers, insisting this was a misunderstanding. Victoria didn't look back. She let the nurse wheel her toward the elevator, her parents flanking her like bodyguards. The NICU occupied the entire 4th floor. Soft lighting, quiet beeps of monitors, tiny humans in plastic boxes fighting to grow strong enough to face the world. A nurse met them at the entrance. "Mrs. Hale, we've been hoping you'd wake up." "Where are they?" "This way." They passed rows of incubators until the nurse stopped at 2 side-by-side bassinets. 2 perfect baby girls, 21 days old, sleeping peacefully. Victoria's breath caught. She'd heard them cry right after birth, heard the nurses cleaning them, heard fragments of conversations about their health. But she hadn't seen them, hadn't held them, hadn't been able to touch her own daughters. "Can I hold them?" Her voice came out small. "Of course." The nurse carefully lifted one baby, wrapped in a pink blanket. "This is baby girl Hale Cross A, 7 pounds, 2 ounces at birth." The baby settled into Victoria's arms with a soft sigh. She was perfect. Tiny nose, dark hair, impossibly small fingers that wrapped reflexively around Victoria's thumb. "Hey, sweetheart," Victoria whispered. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm your mom. I've been trying to get to you for so long." Patricia was crying too, one hand on Victoria's shoulder. Robert stood with his arms crossed tight, jaw clenched, trying to hold himself together. The nurse brought the second baby. "And this is baby girl Hale Cross B, 6 pounds, 14 ounces. She's been a fighter." Victoria cradled both daughters, one in each arm. They were so small, so vulnerable, and Daniel had tried to throw one away like garbage. "They need names," Patricia said gently. Victoria had spent months researching names, making lists, debating meanings and origins. She and Daniel had agreed on Emma Rose for a girl, Michael James for a boy. She wasn't naming her daughters anything Daniel had chosen. "Ava," Victoria said, looking at the baby on her left. "Ava Patricia, after my mom." Patricia made a choked sound. "And Claire," Victoria continued, studying the smaller twin. "Claire Victoria." "Carrying on your name," Robert said. "Someone should." Victoria kissed each baby's forehead. "My girls, both of you. Nobody's taking you anywhere." The nurse cleared her throat. "Mrs. Hale, there's paperwork, custody arrangements. With the arrest, we need clear documentation about who has authority. I'm their mother. I have authority." "Yes, but legally, until the situation with Mr. Cross is resolved, get me a lawyer," Victoria said. "The best family lawyer in Seattle. I don't care what it costs." "I'll make calls," Robert said, already pulling out his phone. Victoria spent the next hour in the NICU, holding her daughters, memorizing their faces, making up for 30 days of forced absence. Nurses came and went, bringing bottles, showing her how to support their heads, explaining feeding schedules. "You're natural at this," one nurse said. Victoria wasn't. Her hands shook. She was terrified of dropping them, of doing something wrong, of failing at the one thing that mattered most. But she held on tight and pretended confidence she didn't feel. That's what she'd always done. Fake it until it becomes real. At some point, Detective Martinez appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Hale, we need to go through some things." Victoria nodded. Patricia took the babies, settling into a rocking chair with practiced ease. Martinez pulled up a chair. "Your husband and his mother have been processed. They've both lawyered up, which we expected. Sophie Lang is in interrogation now." "What's she saying?" "That she didn't know you were still alive. That Daniel told her you died and he needed help with the baby." Martinez's expression said she didn't believe a word. "We pulled her phone records. She's been in contact with your husband since 6 months before your delivery." "I know. I suspected the affair." "Did you confront him?" "No. I was waiting until after the baby was born. I didn't want the stress during pregnancy." Victoria laughed bitterly. "Turns out I should have divorced him months ago." Martinez made notes. "We're building a case for conspiracy to commit fraud. Your husband filed life insurance claims the day after your supposed death. He contacted your company's board about assuming control of your shares. He had Sophie draft transfer documents for the penthouse deed. All while I was 3 floors away in a coma. That's what makes this prosecutable. The timing, the coordination, the evidence that this was planned." Martinez hesitated. "There's something else. We found communication between Evelyn Cross and a private adoption facilitator. The conversation was deleted, but our tech team recovered it." Victoria's grip tightened on the wheelchair armrest. "What did it say?" "Evelyn was asking about discreet placement for a newborn, no questions asked, immediate payment preferred. The facilitator quoted her $50,000 cash." $50,000. That's what her daughter was worth to Evelyn. Less than Victoria's car, less than the diamond bracelet Daniel had bought his mother for Christmas. "Can you use that in court?" "We're working on it. The facilitator disappeared after we started asking questions, but we have the messages, the financial trail." Martinez studied Victoria carefully. "I have to ask, did you know about any of this before the delivery? Did you suspect your husband was planning something?" "I knew about the affair. I didn't know about the rest." Victoria met the detective's eyes. "If you're asking whether I let this happen, the answer is no. I went into that delivery room thinking my husband loved me. I was wrong." "I believe you." "Do you?" "Because I'm a CEO who built a $40 million company before I turned 30. People are going to assume I saw this coming." Martinez leaned forward. "Mrs. Hale, I've worked fraud cases for 8 years. The smartest people get conned every day because they trust someone they love. Intelligence has nothing to do with it." Victoria wanted to believe that, but part of her, the analytical part that had spotted market trends and calculated risk assessments, kept whispering that she should have known, should have seen the signs, should have protected herself. "What happens now?" Victoria asked. "We finish building the case. Your husband will likely make bail unless we can prove flight risk. Evelyn probably will too. Sophie might cooperate in exchange for a lighter sentence." "And my daughters?" "That's family court, not criminal. But given what we've uncovered, I can't imagine any judge awarding custody to your husband." Victoria watched her mother rock Ava and Claire, humming softly. Patricia had always wanted more grandchildren. She'd been heartbroken when Victoria threw herself into work instead of starting a family young. Now she had 2 granddaughters, and their father was being arrested for trying to sell one of them. "I need to go home," Victoria said. "To the penthouse. I need to see what they did." "Mrs. Hale, you can barely walk." "I need to see it," Martinez sighed. "Let me make a call." 2 hours later, Victoria sat in a police car while Martinez drove through downtown Seattle. The city looked different through the window, sharper somehow, more vivid, like dying and coming back had adjusted her vision. They pulled up to Victoria's building, a glass and steel tower overlooking Elliott Bay. She'd bought the penthouse 3 years ago, paid cash, designed every detail herself. The doorman did a double take when he saw her. "Ms. Hale, but I thought—" "I'm not dead, Marcus." "I can see that, ma'am. Welcome home." The elevator ride to the 30th floor felt endless. Victoria's reflection in the mirrored walls showed a stranger. Gaunt face, hospital gown under a borrowed coat, hair tangled and dull. She looked like she'd been to war. She had been. The penthouse door was unlocked. Victoria pushed it open and stepped into her home. It had been gutted. Not physically. The furniture was the same, the art still hung on the walls, the view of the sound was unchanged, but everything personal was gone. Her books had disappeared from the shelves, the photographs of her parents, her college friends, her wedding day, all removed. The cashmere throw blanket she kept on the couch, the ceramic vase she'd bought in Morocco, the vintage record player that had belonged to her grandmother. Gone. In their place, Sophie's things. Cheap fashion magazines on the coffee table, a different brand of coffee in the kitchen, unfamiliar shoes by the door. Victoria walked through rooms that should have felt like home and felt nothing but cold fury. The nursery hurt most. She'd spent months designing it. Soft gray walls, white furniture, a mobile with paper cranes that cast dancing shadows. She'd picked out every detail, the organic cotton sheets, the blackout curtains, the rocking chair positioned to catch the afternoon light. Now it looked like a photo shoot. Too perfect. Staged. None of the practical items she'd purchased, the diaper pail, the bottle warmer, the monitor system, were anywhere in sight, and there was only one crib. Victoria stood in the doorway, staring at the single crib where there should have been two. He was going to pretend she never existed, she said quietly. Martinez stood beside her. Mrs. Hale, Claire. He was going to keep Ava and pretend Claire never existed. One baby makes him sympathetic. Two makes people ask questions. Victoria's hands curled into fists. He chose which daughter to keep like he was picking between brands of cereal. We have it all documented. The judge will see. The judge didn't spend 30 days listening to them plan this. Victoria turned away from the nursery. I did. The master bedroom was worse. The bed she'd shared with Daniel now held different sheets, different pillows. Sophie's clothes hung in Victoria's closet. Cheap perfume replaced the Chanel No. 5 Victoria had worn since college. But it was the nightstand that broke her. Her wedding photo, a candid shot of her and Daniel laughing on a beach in Maui, had been turned face down in the drawer, shoved under magazines and receipts like trash. Victoria picked up the frame. She looked so happy in that photo, so stupidly, naively happy. I loved him, she said. Not at the end, maybe, but once, I really did. Martinez didn't respond. What could she say? Victoria opened the closet and found one of her old business suits still hanging in back, a Armani she'd worn to close her first major funding round. She pulled it out. I'm getting dressed, then we're going to my office. You just got out of a hospital bed. My company has been operating without me for 30 days. The board thinks I'm dead. My competitors are probably circling. I need to make an appearance. Mrs. Hale, you can barely stand. Victoria looked at the detective. I built that company from nothing. I slept in my car while writing code because I couldn't afford rent and office space. I pitched to investors who told me women couldn't run tech companies. I fought for every dollar, every employee, every line of code. Her voice had gone hard. I'm not letting Daniel and his mother steal it because I had the audacity to almost die giving birth. She locked herself in the bathroom and changed. The suit hung loose. She'd lost weight during the coma, but it fit well enough. She found makeup in a drawer Sophie hadn't cleared and covered the worst of the damage. The dark circles, the hollowed cheeks, the pallor of someone who'd been horizontal for a month. When she emerged, Martinez was on the phone. Yes, sir. I understand, but... Yes, okay. She hung up. My captain says I need to bring you back to the hospital. Tell your captain I'm fine. You're not fine. You're running on adrenaline and spite. That's all I've had for 30 days. I'm used to it. Victoria called her assistant, her real assistant, Marcus Chen, who'd worked for her since the company's founding. He answered on the first ring. Marcus, it's Victoria. Silence. Then, holy shit. I need you to call an emergency board meeting. Tonight. Tell them I'm alive and I have things to say. Victoria, the board thinks you're dead. Daniel said you'd been cremated. He's been positioning himself to take over. I know what he's been doing. That's why we're having a meeting. Are you sure you're up for this? No, do it anyway. She hung up and looked at Martinez. I need 2 hours. For what? To remind everyone who actually built this company. The detective studied her for a long moment. You're going to collapse. Probably, but not until after the meeting. Victoria made one more stop before leaving the penthouse. The second bedroom, the one that should have been a home office, had been converted into storage. She found what she was looking for in a box labeled Victoria's Junk. Her laptop, her external hard drives, her backup files, and a small device she'd installed 6 months ago, tucked behind a bookshelf where no one would notice it. A nanny cam. She'd bought it after suspecting Daniel's affair, thinking she might need evidence for divorce proceedings. She'd almost forgotten about it during the pregnancy chaos. Victoria pulled out her phone and accessed the camera's cloud storage. Hours of footage appeared. Time-stamped. Dated. All from the past 30 days. She scrolled through and found exactly what she needed. Daniel and Sophie in the kitchen, 2 days after Victoria's supposed death, drinking her expensive wine and laughing. Evelyn arriving with paperwork, spreading documents across the dining table. The three of them planning, calculating, dividing up Victoria's assets. And a conversation from day 20, crystal clear audio. Evelyn's voice. The hospital called about the second baby. Daniel, what second baby? A twin, born right after the first. They've been trying to reach you. I don't want it. Put it up for adoption. Adoption agencies ask too many questions. I know someone who handles private arrangements. You mean sell it? I mean solve a problem discreetly. 50,000 cash, no paperwork, no trail. Daniel's silence, then, how quickly can you arrange it? Victoria's hands shook as she downloaded the files. She'd heard this conversation while trapped in her hospital bed, heart monitor screaming, unable to move or speak. Now she had proof. Mrs. Hale? Martinez was watching from the doorway. What is that? Victoria turned the phone screen so the detective could see. Evidence. Martinez's eyes widened as she listened to the recording. When it finished, she looked at Victoria with something like awe. You recorded everything. I recorded 6 months of my life. I got lucky. Victoria pocketed the phone. But yes, I have everything. This changes the case completely. With this, you can use it after my board meeting. Right now, I need it for something else. They drove to Victoria's office in silence. The company occupied 3 floors of a tech hub in South Lake Union. Victoria had signed the lease 4 years ago, back when they only had 12 employees. Now they had over 200. The building's security guard gaped when Victoria walked through the lobby. Ms. Hale, we heard, I'm fine. Is the conference room ready? Mr. Chen said to set up the big one. Ma'am, is it true Mr. Cross was trying to... I'll address it in the meeting. She rode the elevator to the 15th floor. Through the glass walls, she could see employees staring. Whispers spread like wildfire. By the time she reached the conference room, half the office had gathered outside. The board was already assembled. 15 people, mostly men, mostly older than Victoria. They'd taken a chance on her 5 years ago when she was just a 25-year-old with a good pitch and better code. Some had believed in her vision, others had believed in the potential profit. They all stood when she entered. Victoria, Thomas Richardson, the board chairman, looked like he'd seen a ghost, which technically he had. We were told you'd passed away. You were told wrong. Victoria took her seat at the head of the table. The chair felt wrong, too big, like she'd shrunk in the past month. She ignored it. Let's talk about what happened while I was gone. The silence in the conference room stretched tight as a wire. Thomas Richardson's face had gone from pale to gray to something approaching green. Beside him, Janet Morrow, the CFO, who'd fought against Victoria's expansion plans last quarter, gripped her pen so hard her knuckles showed white. Your husband told us you died, Thomas said finally. He presented a death certificate. He lied. Victoria placed her phone on the table. He told you I was dead while I was 3 floors up in ICU. He filed life insurance claims while I was conscious but paralyzed. He moved his mistress into my home while my body was still warm. Jesus Christ, someone muttered. And he came to you for control of my shares. Victoria looked at each board member in turn. What did he offer you? Thomas cleared his throat. Victoria, this is hardly the time. It's exactly the time. What did Daniel promise you in exchange for supporting his takeover? The board members exchanged glances. No one wanted to be the first to speak. Janet finally broke. He said you'd want the company to continue your vision, that he understood your strategy and could implement it. Daniel doesn't know the difference between Python and Java. He can't read a balance sheet without help. What could he possibly implement? He had Sophie Lang with him, Janet continued, your executive assistant. She presented detailed plans for the next quarter, new client acquisitions, projected revenue. Plans I wrote 2 months ago. She stole my work. Victoria pulled up files on her phone. Here, every document Daniel presented to you. Date created, date modified, author, metadata. All me. Sophie just changed her name to mine in the file properties. She slid the phone across the table. Thomas picked it up, scrolled through, and his face darkened. This is fraud. That's what the police are calling it too. Daniel was arrested this morning. So was his mother and Sophie. The room erupted. Questions flew from every direction, voices overlapping, some shocked and others calculating how this affected their investments. Victoria let them panic for 30 seconds. Then she stood, placed both hands flat on the table, and waited. The room quieted. Here's what's going to happen, she said. I'm resuming full control of operations effective immediately. Any decisions made in my absence are void unless I explicitly approve them. Any contracts Daniel signed are under review. Any promises he made are meaningless. Victoria, you just came out of a coma. Thomas started. Locked-in syndrome. I was conscious, aware, trapped, but present. She met his eyes. Which means I heard every plan, every betrayal, every lie. I know exactly what happened while I was gone. Do you? Thomas had the grace to look uncomfortable. We were told you died. We had no reason to doubt. You had every reason to doubt. I'm 30 years old and healthy. I hemorrhaged during childbirth, which is survivable with proper care. Did anyone ask for an autopsy, request medical records, verify the death certificate? More uncomfortable silence. You didn't, Victoria continued, because it was convenient. Daniel showing up with my shares and my assistant and my plans made your lives easier. You could keep running the company without dealing with a messy succession battle. That's not fair, Janet protested. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Victoria's voice rose despite her effort to control it. I built this company while sleeping in my car. I coded for 16 hours a day and ate ramen because I couldn't afford both food and server space. I pitched to 50 investors before one of you took a chance on me. And the minute I was gone, you were ready to hand everything to a man whose only qualification is that he married me. The words came out harsher than she intended, but she was too angry to care. Her body hurt. Her head pounded. Every breath felt like work. But she'd been silent for 30 days. She was done being quiet. We made a mistake, Thomas said. A massive mistake. But Victoria, we need to discuss transition plans. You're not in any condition to run a company. I ran this company through morning sickness, through preeclampsia scares, through Braxton Hicks contractions during investor call. I can run it through recovery. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Thomas? Say it clearly. He hesitated. Around the table, board members suddenly found their notepads fascinating. We're concerned, Thomas said carefully, about perception, the media attention, the criminal charges against your husband, the optics of what? A CEO who survived attempted fraud and came back to save her company? That sounds like a hell of a story to me. It sounds like a distraction, Janet said. Investors don't like instability. If this turns into a media circus, it's already a circus. The question is who controls the narrative. Victoria pulled up another file on her phone. I have recordings of Daniel and Evelyn planning to steal my assets. I have evidence they tried to sell one of my infant daughters. I have documentation of every lie they told. We can release this strategically, position me as the victim who fought back. Or we can hide and let the tabloids write whatever they want. Your choice. The room went quiet. You recorded them? Janet's voice held something between horror and admiration. I had a nanny cam. They got sloppy. Victoria didn't mention she'd been conscious during those conversations, listening helplessly. Some details were better kept private. Thomas rubbed his face. This is a PR nightmare. This is an opportunity. We control the message. We come out looking strong. We hide. We look guilty. And if the media asks about your health, your ability to lead, then I tell them the truth. I survived something that should have killed me, and I'm not going anywhere. Marcus Chen appeared in the doorway. Victoria, you have a call. It's urgent. She excused herself and stepped into the hallway. Her legs shook with the effort of standing. She'd been vertical for 3 hours and her body was screaming for rest. This better be important, she said to Marcus. It's your lawyer, the one your dad hired. She says there's a problem with custody. Victoria's blood went cold. Put her through. The call connected. A brisk female voice came through the speaker. Mrs. Hale, this is Jennifer Castellano. I'm the family attorney your father retained. We have a situation. What situation? Daniel's lawyer filed emergency custody papers an hour ago. He's claiming you're mentally unfit due to trauma from the coma. He's asking for full custody of both children pending a psychiatric evaluation. Victoria's hand tightened on the phone. On what grounds? He's arguing that locked-in syndrome could have caused psychological damage, that you're not stable enough to care for newborns. He's got an affidavit from a psychiatrist who says patients emerging from comas often experience, I'm fine. Mrs. Hale, legally, it doesn't matter if you're fine. What matters is what we can prove in court. And right now you've been out of the hospital for less than 8 hours. No psychiatric evaluation, no medical clearance for custody. Daniel's lawyer is good, and she's moving fast. Victoria leaned against the wall. Her vision swam. When's the hearing? Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., Judge Morrison's chambers. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours to prove she was fit to parent her own children. What do I need? Medical evaluation, psychiatric clearance, character witnesses, proof of stable housing, and... Jennifer paused. Mrs. Hale, you need to look healthy. I know that's unfair, but family court judges make snap judgments based on appearance. If you walk in looking like you just escaped death, it won't help. I did just escape death. I know, but we need the judge to see a capable mother, not a trauma victim. Victoria wanted to scream. Instead, she said, I'll be ready. She hung up and found Marcus watching her with concern. You look like you're about to pass out, he said. I'm fine. You're swaying. She was. The hallway tilted slightly, the fluorescent lights too bright. I need coffee. You need a hospital bed. After the board meeting. Victoria. After. She pushed off the wall and walked back into the conference room. The board members went silent when she entered. We done here? She asked Thomas. We have 3 more agenda items. Email them to me. I'll review tonight. Victoria gathered her phone. Unless anyone else wants to discuss handing my company to my husband? No one spoke. Good. Marcus will send out communications tomorrow confirming I'm alive and resuming operations. Any questions about my absence get directed to our legal team. We don't comment on ongoing criminal investigations. Clear? Nods around the table. Victoria walked out before anyone could argue. The elevator ride down felt endless. Her reflection in the chrome doors showed a woman running on fumes and fury. Detective Martinez was waiting in the lobby. You were supposed to rest, the detective said. I did. I sat during the meeting. That's not what rest means. They drove back toward the hospital. Victoria watched Seattle slide past the window, the city she'd conquered once and would have to conquer again. Daniel filed for custody, she said. Martinez's jaw tightened. Of course he did. Hearings tomorrow. His lawyer's claiming I'm mentally unfit. That's rich, coming from a man who tried to sell one of his daughters. Rich doesn't mean ineffective. He's got a psychiatrist ready to testify that coma patients experience psychological trauma. Do you want me to testify? I can explain what we found. It won't matter. This isn't criminal court. Family judges care about stability, resources, mental health. Daniel has all 3 on paper. I have trauma and revenge. They pulled up to the hospital. Victoria's parents were in the waiting room, both babies sleeping in car seats at their feet. Patricia stood when she saw Victoria. How did it go? The board's back under control. Daniel filed for custody. The hearing's tomorrow. Her mother's face crumpled. He can't. After what he did, he can and he is. His lawyer's smart. Victoria knelt beside the car seats, her knees protesting the movement. Ava and Claire slept peacefully, tiny chests rising and falling in sync. 3 weeks old. They didn't know their father had tried to erase one of them. Didn't know their mother had spent a month trapped and helpless. Didn't know anything except hunger and warmth and sleep. Victoria wanted to keep it that way forever. We need a plan, Robert said. He'd been making notes on his phone. Medical evaluation tonight. I called Dr. Morrison. He's willing to come in. Psychiatric eval first thing tomorrow morning. Jennifer says we need character witnesses. I've got a list of colleagues who can testify to your stability. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I already lost you once. I'm not losing you again, and I'm sure as hell not losing my granddaughters to that bastard. Her father never cursed. Hearing him say bastard with such venom almost made Victoria smile. Dr. Morrison arrived 30 minutes later. He examined Victoria thoroughly, checking reflexes, cognitive function, running her through a battery of tests designed to prove brain function. Physically, you're recovering well, he said. The paralysis was temporary, caused by the hemorrhage and resulting hypoxia. Your neural pathways are intact. Motor function is returning normally. In English? You're going to be fine, physically. He paused. Psychologically, I can't speak to. That's not my specialty. I'm seeing a psychiatrist tomorrow morning. Good, because Victoria, what you went through, being conscious but trapped, hearing people plan to destroy you, that's not something you just walk off. You need to process it. After I get custody. That's what everyone says. Then the custody battle ends and there's something else urgent and you never deal with the trauma until it deals with you. Victoria knew he was right. She also knew she couldn't afford to fall apart right now. One crisis at a time, she said. The psychiatric evaluation happened at 6 a.m. the next morning. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus, spent 2 hours asking Victoria questions about her mental state, her plans for childcare, her support system. You've been through significant trauma, Dr. Chen said. Birth trauma, medical trauma, emotional betrayal. That's a lot to process while also caring for newborn twins. I have help. My parents are staying with me. I can afford childcare. It's not about logistics. It's about whether you're emotionally ready. Victoria met the psychiatrist's eyes. If someone tried to erase your children, would you be emotionally ready? Or would you be too busy fighting to save them? Dr. Chen made a note. That's a fair point. I'm not okay. I won't pretend to be. But my daughters are safer with me than with a man who tried to sell one of them for cash. I'm going to recommend supervised custody, Dr. Chen said. Not because I think you're unfit, but because you need support. Your parents can provide that supervision. Will that be enough for the judge? I honestly don't know. Family court is unpredictable. The hearing started at 9 a.m. sharp. Judge Andrea Morrison, no relation to Dr. Morrison, presided over a cramped chambers that smelled like old books and stale coffee. Daniel sat across the room with his lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Caroline West, who looked like she ate other attorneys for breakfast. He'd been released on bail, probably funded by Evelyn's emergency cash reserves. He looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled suit, eyes bloodshot, playing the devastated husband card. Victoria wore her best court-appropriate dress, hair pulled back, minimal makeup. Jennifer had coached her. Look competent, not combative. Show strength, not anger. Let's begin, Judge Morrison said. She was in her 60s, gray hair cut severely short, reading glasses perched on her nose. Mr. Cross, your petition claims Mrs. Hale is mentally unfit due to trauma. Present your evidence. Caroline West stood. Your Honor, Mrs. Hale spent 30 days in a locked-in coma, a condition that involves complete paralysis while remaining conscious. The psychological impact of such trauma cannot be overstated. We have an affidavit from Dr. Richard Paulson, a psychiatrist specializing in post-coma recovery, stating that patients who emerge from locked-in syndrome often experience PTSD, paranoia, and difficulty distinguishing reality from traumatic memory. I've read Dr. Paulson's statement, the judge said. Do you have any evidence specific to Mrs. Hale's condition? Dr. Paulson hasn't examined her personally, but his expertise, so no. Caroline shifted gears. Your Honor, Mrs. Hale left the hospital less than 48 hours ago. She hasn't undergone proper rehabilitation. She's physically weak, emotionally compromised, and in no condition to care for one infant, let alone two. Mrs. Hale's attorney, your response? Jennifer stood. Your Honor, Mrs. Hale has been medically cleared by Dr. Morrison, who oversaw her recovery. She's undergone psychiatric evaluation by Dr. Sarah Chen, who found her mentally competent and recommended family support rather than institutional intervention. Mrs. Hale has that support through her parents, who are providing temporary housing and assistance. And what about Mr. Cross? The judge asked. Where's he living? Caroline answered quickly. Mr. Cross remains in the family home, a fully equipped penthouse with a dedicated nursery. The nursery has one crib, Victoria said. Judge Morrison looked at her over her reading glasses. Excuse me? Jennifer put a hand on Victoria's arm, but Victoria ignored it. The nursery has one crib, Your Honor, because my husband planned to keep one daughter and sell the other. That's a baseless accusation, Caroline started. I have recordings. Victoria pulled out her phone. From a security camera in my home. Would you like to hear them? The judge held out her hand. I would. Victoria handed over the phone. Judge Morrison played the recording, her expression unchanging as she listened to Daniel and Evelyn discuss selling Claire. The silence when it finished was absolute. Mr. Cross, the judge said quietly, would you like to explain this conversation? Daniel looked like he might throw up. It was taken out of context. My mother was upset. She wasn't thinking clearly. It's your voice agreeing to the arrangement. I was in shock. I just lost my wife. I was overwhelmed. You hadn't lost her. She was alive, 3 floors up, listening to you plan this. Caroline tried to intervene. Your Honor, this recording was obtained without consent. In Washington state, one-party consent is sufficient for recording. Mrs. Hale owned the home where the recording was made. It's admissible. Judge Morrison set the phone down. Anything else, Mrs. West? Caroline looked at Daniel, who was staring at the floor. No, Your Honor. Mrs. Castellano? Jennifer stood. We request full custody for Mrs. Hale, with supervised visitation for Mr. Cross pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. Supervised visitation for a father with his own children? Caroline objected. That's excessive. He tried to sell one of them. Judge Morrison's voice could have cut glass. Excessive would be denying him access entirely, which I'm seriously considering. She made notes, her pen scratching loudly in the quiet chamber. Here's my ruling, she said finally. Full physical custody goes to Mrs. Hale, with legal custody shared pending criminal trial outcomes. Mr. Cross gets supervised visitation, 2 hours per week, at a court-approved facility. He is not to remove either child from Mrs. Hale's care without court permission. If he violates these terms, visitation is revoked entirely. Your Honor, that's unreasonable, Caroline started. What's unreasonable is a father trying to sell his daughter like a used car. Be grateful I'm allowing any contact at all. Judge Morrison looked at Victoria. Mrs. Hale, you're to continue with psychiatric care and report back in 30 days. I want to see evidence of ongoing therapy and stable housing. Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Cross, if I find out you've contacted your wife or children outside approved visitation, you'll be back in jail. Are we clear? Daniel nodded mutely. Good. We're done here. Victoria stood on shaking legs. Jennifer gripped her elbow, steadying her. They walked out of chambers into the courthouse hallway. Patricia and Robert waited on a bench, each holding a baby. We won, Victoria said. Her mother burst into tears. Robert just nodded, looking like he'd aged another 10 years in the past 2 hours. Daniel emerged from chambers with Caroline. He looked at Victoria, opened his mouth like he might say something, then closed it again. Don't, Victoria said. Just don't. He walked away. Caroline lingered. This isn't over. When the criminal trial concludes, your client will be in prison. Save your threats for someone who cares. Jennifer pulled Victoria aside once Caroline left. That went better than expected. The recording was key. I got lucky. No, you got smart. Installing that camera saved your daughters. Jennifer hesitated. But Victoria, the judge was serious about therapy. If you don't comply, she can revisit custody. I'll comply. And you need stable housing. Living with your parents is fine short term, but the court will want to see you independent. The penthouse is legally mine. It's also a crime scene and a reminder of trauma. I'd recommend somewhere new. Victoria nodded. She couldn't go back there anyway. Too many ghosts. They walked out into the Seattle morning. Rain was falling, because of course it was. Victoria tilted her face up and let it wash over her. Mom, can you take the girls back to the hospital? She asked. I need to make a stop. Victoria, you should rest. I will. Soon. I promise. She borrowed Marcus's car and drove across the city to a neighborhood she hadn't visited in years. Modest houses, tree-lined streets, the kind of place where kids played basketball in driveways and neighbors actually knew each other. The house she stopped at was small but well kept. Blue shutters, white trim, a garden that someone actually cared for. She knocked on the door. A woman answered, mid-30s, tired eyes. Can I help you? Are you Rebecca Cross? The woman's expression shuddered. Who's asking? I'm Victoria Hale, Daniel's wife. She paused. Ex-wife, probably, once the lawyers finish. Rebecca's face went through several emotions, surprise, suspicion, something that might have been pity. I heard you were dead. I got better. Can I come in? Rebecca considered, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. The house was small but comfortable. Toys scattered across the living room floor, crayon drawings on the refrigerator, evidence of a child who was loved and cared for. Where's Jake? Victoria asked. Daniel's son from his first marriage, the one she'd barely been allowed to meet. School. Why are you here? Because Daniel was arrested for trying to sell one of our daughters, and I need to know if Jake is safe. Rebecca sat down heavily. Jesus, I heard he was arrested, but the news didn't say. She looked at Victoria. He really tried to sell a baby? His mother arranged it. He agreed. I have recordings. Of course Evelyn was involved. That woman is poison. Rebecca rubbed her face. Jake is safe. Daniel hasn't seen him in 3 months. 3 months? But the custody agreement says every other weekend. Daniel shows up maybe once a month, always with excuses. Work trip, business emergency. Too tired. Rebecca's voice was bitter. He wanted a divorce the minute I got pregnant, said a baby would ruin his life. Then when Jake was born, he wanted visitation rights so he'd look like a responsible father to his new girlfriend. That would be me. Yeah, no offense, but you weren't the first. Sophie Lang wasn't the first either. Victoria absorbed that. How many? That I know about? 4, including you. Probably more I didn't catch. And you didn't warn me. Would you have listened? Women never do. They think they're different, they're special. He really loves them this time. Rebecca's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry. That was harsh. It's fair. Victoria looked at the toy trucks scattered across the floor. How's Jake handling everything? He barely remembers Daniel. I've tried to maintain the relationship for his sake, but it's hard when his father can't be bothered to show up. Would you let me see him? Meet him properly? Rebecca frowned. Why? Because he's my daughter's brother. Because family is more than just biology. Because I don't want him to grow up thinking he was forgotten. You almost died and your husband tried to steal your company and you're worried about my kid? Our kid. Technically. Victoria managed a tired smile. Look, I'm not trying to replace you or confuse him, but I have resources. And if there's anything Jake needs, we're fine. I'm sure you are. But if that changes, or if he wants to meet his sisters when they're older, I want the door open, that's all. Rebecca studied her for a long moment. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Another version of Evelyn, rich, cold, more interested in appearances than people. I'm definitely not Evelyn. Victoria stood. I should go. But here's my number. If you ever need anything, or if Jake has questions, call me. She left her card on the coffee table and walked out. The drive back to the hospital felt longer than it was. Victoria's body was screaming now, every muscle sore, her head pounding. She'd been running on adrenaline and spite for 48 hours, and both were running out. She parked in the hospital garage and sat in the car for 5 minutes, just breathing. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Hale, this is Andrea Morrison, the judge from this morning? Victoria sat up straighter. Your Honor, is something wrong? No, nothing wrong. I'm calling off the record, which is highly irregular, but I wanted to say something I couldn't say in chambers. Okay. What you survived was unconscionable. What your husband did was criminal. But what impressed me most was your focus on your children, not your revenge. You could have tried to deny Daniel all access, and honestly, I would have allowed it based on that recording. But you didn't. You accepted supervised visitation because you know those girls might want a relationship with their father someday, even if he doesn't deserve it. Victoria didn't know what to say. I'm telling you this, Judge Morrison continued, because family court sees a lot of parents who use their children as weapons against each other. You didn't do that. In my book, that makes you a good mother. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Thank you, Your Honor. Take care of yourself, Mrs. Hale. Those babies need you healthy. The line went dead. Victoria sat in the parking garage and cried for the first time since waking up. Not from sadness or in anger or fear, but from pure exhaustion and relief. She'd won. Her daughters were safe. The company was secure. Daniel was facing consequences. She'd won. Now she just had to figure out how to keep winning. Victoria made it to the elevator before her legs gave out. One moment she was walking, the next she was on her knees on the concrete, hands splayed against the cold floor, vision tunneling to a pinpoint of light. Her body had finally hit its limit. A security guard rushed over. "Ma'am, are you okay?" "Fine," she managed. "Just need a minute." "I'm calling for help." "Don't. Please. Just give me a second." But he was already on his radio, and within minutes a wheelchair appeared along with a nurse who'd seen Victoria leave the hospital earlier against medical advice. "Told you this would happen," the nurse said, not unkindly as she helped Victoria into the chair. "You were right. Happy?" "Ecstatic. Let's get you upstairs before you collapse completely." They wheeled her back to a room, not the ICU this time, just a regular recovery suite, and hooked her up to monitors that immediately started complaining about her blood pressure and heart rate. "Your body went through massive trauma," the nurse explained while adjusting an IV. "Then you spent a month immobile. You can't just jump back into running a company and fighting custody battles. You need to heal." "I don't have time to heal. Then you'll collapse again. Next time might be worse." The nurse fixed Victoria with a stern look. "You have 2 babies who need their mother alive and functional. That means rest, proper nutrition, physical therapy, not board meetings and courtrooms." Victoria wanted to argue. Instead, she closed her eyes and let exhaustion drag her under. She woke 6 hours later to find her mother sitting beside the bed, reading a book while Ava slept in her lap. "Where's Claire?" Victoria asked, her voice rough. "With your father. They're bonding over terrible reality TV in the waiting room." Patricia set down her book. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck." "You pushed too hard." "I had to. The custody hearing is over. You won. Now you need to recover." Patricia shifted Ava carefully. "The nurse said you're severely dehydrated and your iron levels are dangerous. They want to keep you overnight." "I can't stay here. The girls will be fine with us for one night." "Victoria, you're no good to anyone if you're dead." The blunt words hit harder than Patricia probably intended. Victoria looked at her daughter sleeping peacefully in her grandmother's arms, completely oblivious to everything that had happened. "I'm scared," Victoria admitted quietly. "If I stop moving, if I let myself think about it all, it'll catch up with you eventually. Better to deal with it now than let it ambush you later." "That's what Dr. Morrison said. Smart man. You should listen to him." Patricia stood and placed Ava in Victoria's arms. "Here. Hold your daughter. Let yourself feel something other than rage and fear." Ava weighed almost nothing, warm and solid and real. She made a small sound in her sleep, her face scrunching up before relaxing again. Victoria had held her babies before, in the NICU, but there'd been so much chaos and urgency that she hadn't really absorbed it. Now, lying in a hospital bed with nowhere to run, she finally let herself feel the weight of it. This was her daughter. Hers to protect, to raise, to love. And she'd almost lost her before even getting the chance to know her. The tears came then, hot and unexpected, rolling down her face and dripping onto the hospital gown. "That's it," Patricia said softly. "Let it out." "I heard everything, Mom. Every word they said, every plan they made, and I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but listen while they decided which daughter to keep and which one to sell." "I know, baby." Claire was just a problem to them, an inconvenience. She's 3 weeks old, and they were ready to erase her like she never existed. Patricia's face hardened. "Daniel will pay for that. The courts will make sure of it." "The courts are slow. He's out on bail right now, Evelyn too. Sophie's probably already making deals with prosecutors." Victoria wiped her eyes with her free hand. They tried to destroy me, and they're walking around free. Not for long. Jennifer says the trial should start within 3 months. The evidence is overwhelming. 3 months felt like forever. 3 months of wondering if Daniel would try something else, if Evelyn would find another way to interfere, if Sophie would sell her story to tabloids. A nurse came in to check vitals and found Victoria's blood pressure spiking again. "You need to calm down," she said. "Whatever you're thinking about, stop." Easy to say. Harder to do when your brain wouldn't stop replaying 30 days of horror. Patricia took Ava back. "I'm going to let you rest. Your father and I will keep the girls tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps." "Mom, wait." Victoria caught her hand. "Thank you for coming, for believing me, for everything. You're my daughter. Where else would I be?" After Patricia left, Victoria lay in the quiet room and tried to sleep. But every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the coma, paralyzed and helpless, listening to people plot her destruction. At 2 in the morning, she gave up and turned on the TV. Local news was covering her story. Of course they were. A CEO who'd survived death and exposed her husband's conspiracy was exactly the kind of sensational garbage that drove ratings. The anchor's voice was professionally sympathetic. Victoria Hale, founder and CEO of DataSync Technologies, has been released from the hospital after spending nearly a month in what doctors are calling locked-in syndrome, a rare condition where patients are conscious but completely paralyzed. Victoria changed the channel. Found the same story on 3 other stations. Entertainment shows were already speculating about movie deals and book rights. Her phone buzzed with the text from Marcus. "News vans outside the office, 23 interview requests. What do you want me to tell them?" Victoria typed back, "Nothing, no comment on anything." They're relentless. One reporter tried to bribe the receptionist. Still no comment. Forward everything to Jennifer. She set the phone down and found another news channel playing footage of Daniel being led out of the courthouse in handcuffs. He looked smaller on screen, diminished somehow. Not the charming man she'd married, just a scared criminal facing consequences. The anchor was interviewing a legal analyst. "The charges are serious: conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted child trafficking, filing false insurance claims. If convicted, Daniel Cross could face up to 15 years in prison." 15 years. Victoria tried to feel satisfaction and found only numbness. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was an unknown number, but the message made her stomach drop. "You always were a vindictive bitch. Enjoy your victory while it lasts." Evelyn. Somehow out on bail and already making threats. Victoria screenshot the message and forwarded it to Detective Martinez with a note. "Violating bail conditions?" The response came within minutes. "Sending someone to pick her up now. Don't respond to her." Victoria blocked the number and tried to sleep again. Failed again. At 4 a.m., she was still awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning through everything that needed to happen next. Find a new place to live. The penthouse was contaminated now, every room holding memories of betrayal. Hire a nanny. She couldn't do this alone, and her parents couldn't stay forever. Return to work properly. The board meeting had been a power play, but the company needed real leadership. Prepare for trial. Jennifer would need her testimony, evidence, documentation of everything that happened. Figure out how to be a mother while also being a CEO and recovering from trauma and not falling apart completely. The list was overwhelming. Victoria closed her eyes and tried breathing exercises the nurse had shown her. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. It didn't help. By the time dawn broke, Victoria had made a decision. She couldn't keep running on rage and determination alone. She needed actual help. At 7 a.m., she called Dr. Chen, the psychiatrist from the custody evaluation. "Mrs. Hale, is everything all right?" "No, but I need it to be. Can you take me on as a patient? Regular sessions, not just court-mandated evaluation." "Of course. When can you start?" "Today?" A pause. "I have an opening at noon, but you should still be in the hospital. I'll be there." Victoria checked herself out against medical advice for the second time in 48 hours. The nurses looked at her like she was insane, and maybe she was, but staying in that room was driving her crazy. Her parents met her in the lobby with both babies and expressions that said they wanted to argue but knew it wouldn't help. "I have a therapy appointment," Victoria said before they could start. "Then we're going house hunting." "Victoria, You need rest. I need forward motion. If I stay still, I'll lose my mind. She took Claire from her father's arms. Trust me, I know my limits. Do you? Robert asked quietly. Because from where I'm standing, you passed them 2 days ago. He wasn't wrong. Victoria's whole body ached, her head pounded with every heartbeat, and exhaustion made everything feel slightly unreal. But the alternative was lying in a hospital bed with nothing to do but think. I'll rest after therapy, she compromised. A few hours. Then we look at houses. They drove to Dr. Chen's office in silence. The psychiatrist practiced in a converted house in Queen Anne, all soft colors and comfortable furniture designed to put patients at ease. Victoria sat in an overstuffed chair and immediately wanted to fall asleep in it. Tell me how you're doing, Dr. Chen said. Honestly. Terrible. I can't sleep. When I do sleep, I have nightmares. I can't stop thinking about everything I heard while I was paralyzed. I'm angry all the time, and I'm terrified that if I let my guard down for even a second, something else will go wrong. That's a trauma response. Your brain is stuck in survival mode. How do I get unstuck? Time, processing, probably medication, at least short term. Dr. Chen made notes. You experienced multiple traumas simultaneously. Medical trauma from the hemorrhage, psychological trauma from the locked-in syndrome, betrayal trauma from your husband's actions. That's not something you recover from in a few days. I don't have time for slow recovery. I have a company to run and babies to raise. Then you need to find ways to manage the symptoms while healing happens. Anti-anxiety medication to help you sleep, therapy to process the trauma, support systems to handle the practical demands of your life. I'm not good at asking for help. I've noticed. But Victoria, you can't do this alone. You'll burn out, and then where will your daughters be? The same argument everyone kept making. Victoria hated that they were right. What do you recommend? She asked. Medication to start. I'm prescribing something for anxiety and sleep. Take it seriously. No skipping doses because you think you're fine. Dr. Chen leaned forward. Therapy twice a week for the next month. Then we reassess. And I want you to build a team. Not just employees, but people you trust to share the load. A nanny, a housekeeper, maybe a personal assistant who isn't sleeping with your husband. Victoria managed a weak laugh. Low bar, but sure. They spent the next hour discussing coping mechanisms, stress management, and ways to handle triggers. By the time Victoria left, she had a prescription, a treatment plan, and a reading list of books about trauma recovery. She also had a headache that felt like someone was drilling into her skull. Now can you rest? Patricia asked when Victoria got back to the car. After we look at houses. Victoria, Mom, I can't go back to the penthouse. I can't. Every room in that place has a memory I can't handle right now. I need somewhere new, somewhere that's just mine. Victoria's voice cracked. Please, I need this. Patricia exchanged a look with Robert, then sighed. 2 houses, then you rest. 3. 2. They compromised on 3. The first house was too big, too empty, too much space for echoes and loneliness. The second was too small, barely enough room for Victoria and the twins, let alone visitors or help. The third was a rental in Magnolia, a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and a view of Puget Sound. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen that hadn't been updated since 1995, but was clean and functional. Hardwood floors throughout, a small yard with overgrown flower beds, neighbors who minded their own business. It was perfect. I'll take it, Victoria told the rental agent. Don't you want to think about it? See a few more options? No? I want this one. When can I move in? The agent blinked. There's an application process, credit checks, references. I'll pay 6 months' rent up front. Cash. Today. Money solved most logistical problems. By evening, Victoria had signed the lease, arranged for furniture delivery, and hired a cleaning service to make the place move-in ready within 48 hours. Her parents looked simultaneously impressed and concerned. You sure about this? Robert asked as they drove back to the hotel where the Hales had been staying. No, but I'm sure I can't go back to the penthouse, and I'm sure I need my own space before I lose my mind completely. They spent the next day shopping for essentials. Cribs for the babies, a bed for Victoria, basic furniture, and kitchen supplies. Patricia insisted on buying sheets and towels. Robert covered all the baby gear, and by the time they finished, Victoria's new house was starting to look like an actual home. She moved in on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after waking from the coma. The movers brought boxes from the penthouse. Only her personal belongings, nothing that Daniel or Sophie had touched. Everything else was being handled by lawyers as part of the divorce proceedings Victoria had started the day after the custody hearing. That night, Victoria sat on her new couch in her new living room and fed Claire a bottle while Ava slept in a bassinet nearby. The house was quiet except for the sound of Claire eating and the distant hum of traffic. For the first time in weeks, Victoria felt like she could breathe. Her phone rang. Jennifer Castellano. "We have a trial date," the lawyer said. "September 15th, 4 months from now." "That's fast?" "The prosecutor wants to move quickly before media attention dies down. Public opinion is strongly in your favor right now. Wronged mother, evil husband, attempted child trafficking. It's a prosecutor's dream case." "What do you need from me?" "Testimony, documentation, the recordings from your security camera, medical records showing you were conscious during the locked-in syndrome." Jennifer paused. "And Victoria, you need to be prepared for what Daniel's defense will try. They're going to paint you as vindictive, as someone who set him up, as an unreliable witness because of trauma." "I know. They'll bring up your company, your wealth, suggest you're trying to destroy him financially. They'll question whether you were really conscious or if you've constructed false memories. They'll make this ugly. It's already ugly. It's going to get worse before it gets better." Victoria looked at her daughters, both sleeping now, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. "I can handle it," she said. "I know you can. Just be ready." After hanging up, Victoria took her prescribed anti-anxiety medication for the first time and crawled into bed. Sleep came easier than it had in days, dreamless and deep. The next morning, she woke to Claire crying and Ava joining in moments later, a stereo of infant demands that pulled Victoria from sleep with the efficiency of an alarm clock. She fed them, changed them, dressed them in matching outfits her mother had bought. Then she strapped them both into car seats and drove to her office. Marcus met her at the door. "Boss, are you sure about this?" "About what?" "Bringing babies to work. The board already thinks you're unstable. The board can deal with it. I'm a working mother. This is what that looks like." Victoria maneuvered the double stroller through the lobby. "Anyone who has a problem with it can schedule a meeting." She set up the babies in her office, a space she'd designed with floor-to-ceiling windows and enough room for a conference table. The girls went into portable cribs she'd had Marcus bring in yesterday, and Victoria dove into email. 400 unread messages. Most were condolences that had arrived when people thought she was dead. Reading them was surreal. "So sorry for your loss. Victoria was an inspiration to us all. The tech world has lost a visionary." She deleted them all and focused on the ones that mattered: client updates, project statuses, urgent decisions that had been delayed during her absence. By noon, she'd cleared half her inbox and fed the babies twice. By 3, she'd taken 3 conference calls while bouncing Claire on her knee. By 5, she was exhausted but functional. Marcus poked his head in. "There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." "Who?" "Sophie Lang." Victoria's hand stilled on the keyboard. "She has some nerve." "Want me to call security?" Victoria looked at her daughters, both sleeping peacefully after their afternoon feeding. Then she looked at the woman who'd slept with her husband and tried to steal her life. "No," she said. "Send her in, but stay close." Sophie walked in looking nothing like the polished assistant Victoria remembered. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing jeans and a hoodie instead of the designer suits she used to favor. "I know you don't want to see me," Sophie said before Victoria could speak, "but I need to say something." "You have 5 minutes." Sophie sat without being invited. "I'm cooperating with the prosecution, testifying against Daniel and Evelyn in exchange for a reduced sentence." "Good for you." "I'm also here to apologize." Victoria laughed, sharp and bitter. "You're apologizing. How generous." "I know it doesn't fix anything." "You're right. It doesn't." Victoria stood, hands flat on her desk. "You slept with my husband. You moved into my home while I was in a coma. You helped him plan to steal my company. And you knew about the plan to sell my daughter." "I didn't know you were still conscious." "Does that make it better? If I'd actually been dead, would that make what you did acceptable?" Sophie looked at the floor. No. Then why are you here? Because I need you to know I'm sorry. I need you to know that I was stupid and greedy, and I believed Daniel when he said you didn't love him anymore, that the marriage was over, that he was going to leave you anyway, so you thought you'd help him along? I thought I was in love with him. Sophie's voice broke. I thought he loved me. I thought we'd be together after everything settled, and then I found out he'd been sleeping with 2 other women the whole time we were together. Victoria sat back down. You're telling me this why? Because I was you. Maybe not exactly, but close enough. I trusted someone who didn't deserve it. I believed lies because I wanted them to be true. And I'm sorry that I helped him hurt you. Your apology doesn't undo the damage. I know, but it's all I have. Sophie stood. The prosecutors want detailed testimony about everything Daniel and Evelyn said in front of me. I'm giving them everything. Every plan, every conversation, every piece of evidence I can remember. Again, good for you. That doesn't make us friends. I'm not asking for friendship. I'm asking for you to know that I regret everything and that I'm trying to make it right. She left before Victoria could respond. Marcus appeared in the doorway. You okay? No, but I will be. Victoria looked at her daughters. I have to be. The weeks blurred together after that. Victoria fell into a routine. Wake up with the babies at 6, feed and change them, go to the office by 9 with both girls in tow, work while they slept, take calls while they cried, leave by 4 to avoid rush hour. Her mother came over 3 evenings a week to help with night feedings. Victoria hired a part-time nanny named Maria, who didn't ask questions about the news coverage and didn't seem fazed by having a boss who sometimes cried during diaper changes. Physical therapy twice a week to rebuild strength. Therapy with Dr. Chen twice a week to keep her from falling apart completely. Medication every night to help her sleep without nightmares. It wasn't perfect. Some days Victoria could barely function, exhaustion and trauma hitting her like a physical weight. Other days she felt almost normal, almost like the person she'd been before everything fell apart. The media attention was relentless. Reporters camped outside her office, her house, even her parents' hotel, until they finally flew back to Florida. Victoria stopped reading the coverage after finding an article that questioned whether she'd faked the locked-in syndrome for sympathy. Daniel's supervised visitation happened every Saturday at a court-appointed facility. Victoria never attended, couldn't stomach the thought of seeing him. Her parents took the girls and reported back that Daniel seemed uncomfortable holding his own daughters, like he didn't know what to do with them. Good, Victoria thought. Let him be uncomfortable. Evelyn had been rearrested for violating bail conditions. The threatening text had been enough, and was currently in jail awaiting trial. Her lawyer was trying to negotiate a plea deal, but prosecutors weren't budging. 3 months after waking from the coma, Victoria stood in her new house and realized she'd made it through the worst. She was alive. Her daughters were healthy. Her company was stable. The trial was approaching, but she was ready, or as ready as she'd ever be. The night before the trial started, Victoria couldn't sleep despite the medication. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through testimony in her head, imagining every question the defense might ask. At 2 a.m., she gave up and went to check on the girls. Both sleeping peacefully, Claire with her thumb in her mouth, Ava with both arms thrown above her head like she was celebrating something. Victoria stood in the doorway and watched them breathe. I'm going to tell them what you did, she whispered to the darkness. Every word you said, every plan you made. And when they ask me if I'm sure, if my memory is reliable, if I really heard everything, I'm going to look them in the eye and say yes. Because I remember every second of being trapped in that bed, listening to you try to erase me. The babies slept on, undisturbed. Victoria went back to bed, and this time, finally, she slept. The courthouse steps were crawling with cameras. Victoria sat in the car with Jennifer, watching reporters jockey for position, their equipment creating a gauntlet she'd have to walk through to reach the entrance. Behind them, news vans lined the street like a parade of vultures. Ready? Jennifer asked. No. Victoria checked her reflection in the compact mirror. Minimal makeup, hair pulled back, navy suit that said professional without trying too hard. She looked tired because she was tired, but that was fine. Juries didn't trust people who looked too polished. Remember what we practiced. Answer only what's asked. Don't volunteer information. If you need a break, tell me. I've testified before. Depositions, patent disputes. This is different. They're going to come at you hard. Make it personal. Try to break you. Victoria thought about 30 days of being trapped and helpless while her life was dismantled around her. They can try. She stepped out of the car, and the shouting started immediately. Victoria, how does it feel to face your husband in court? Are you seeking the death penalty? What do you want people to know about locked-in syndrome? Victoria kept her eyes forward and walked. Jennifer ran interference, physically blocking reporters who got too close. They made it through the courthouse doors and into relative quiet. The courtroom was smaller than Victoria expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, rows of benches already filling with journalists and spectators. Daniel sat at the defense table with Caroline West, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. He looked thinner, older, like jail time didn't agree with him. Good. Evelyn sat at a separate table with her own attorney, keeping distance between herself and her son. Smart strategy, trying to make it look like they weren't in this together. Victoria took her seat behind the prosecution table. The lead prosecutor, Alan Chen, no relation to her therapist, turned to give her a reassuring nod. "We've got this," he said quietly. The bailiff called for everyone to rise as Judge Howard entered. He was in his late 50s, reputation for being tough but fair, no tolerance for theatrics. "Be seated," Judge Howard said. "Let's begin." The prosecution's opening statement laid out the facts with clinical precision. Daniel's affair with Sophie Lang, the plan to inherit Victoria's estate, the attempt to sell one of the twins, the recordings that proved premeditation. Caroline West's opening for the defense was exactly what Jennifer had predicted. Victoria was unreliable, traumatized, possibly confused about what she'd heard during the coma. Daniel was a grieving husband making difficult decisions in an impossible situation. The recordings were taken out of context. Evelyn's attorney argued his client had simply been trying to help her son navigate a crisis, and any discussions about the second baby were purely hypothetical. The jury looked skeptical. That was something. The first day was mostly procedural. Medical experts explaining locked-in syndrome, doctors testifying about Victoria's condition, establishing the timeline of events. Victoria listened and made notes, cataloging everything for when her turn came. Daniel never looked at her. Not once. He kept his eyes on his lawyer or the judge, or his hands folded on the table. Coward. On day 2, they called Dr. Morrison, the neurologist who diagnosed Victoria's condition. "In your medical opinion," Alan Chen asked, "was Mrs. Hale conscious during the 30 days she spent in locked-in syndrome?" "Absolutely. Her EEG showed normal brain activity. She responded to stimuli. When she emerged, she had detailed memories of conversations and events that occurred while she was paralyzed." Could she have constructed those memories after the fact, heard things from other people and believed she experienced them firsthand? No, her recall was too specific. She knew details that weren't public knowledge, private conversations, exact phrasings. The only way she could have that information was by being present and aware when they occurred. Caroline West stood for cross-examination. "Dr. Morrison, isn't it true that patients emerging from comas often experience confusion? False memories?" "That's true for some coma patients. Mrs. Hale wasn't in a coma. She had locked-in syndrome, which is completely different." "But she was declared dead." Her heart stopped. "Briefly, due to hemorrhagic shock. Her heart was restarted and her brain function never ceased." "Are you certain? Could there have been brain damage that affected her memory or perception?" "All scans showed normal function. Mrs. Hale's cognitive abilities were and are completely intact." West tried a few more angles, but Dr. Morrison didn't budge. The science was clear. On day 3, they played the recordings. The courtroom went silent as Evelyn's voice filled the space. "I know someone who handles private arrangements. 50,000 cash, no paperwork, no trail." Then Daniel, "How quickly can you arrange it?" Victoria watched the jury. Several were taking notes. One woman looked actively disgusted. The foreman, a middle-aged man in a plaid shirt, kept glancing at Daniel with barely concealed contempt. They played the conversation 3 times. Once for the jury, once for confirmation of accuracy, once because the prosecution wanted to make sure everyone heard exactly what had been said. When it finished, Caroline West stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to note that this recording was obtained without the knowledge or consent of my client." "Washington is a one-party consent state," Judge Howard interrupted. Mrs. Hale owned the property. The recording is admissible. Move on. Wes sat down, her expression tight. Evelyn's attorney tried to argue the conversation was hypothetical, that his client never actually contacted an adoption facilitator. Then the prosecution produced phone records showing calls to 3 different private adoption agencies, including one that specialized in discreet placements. The afternoon session brought Sophie Lang to the stand. She looked small up there, scared, nothing like the confident assistant who used to stride through Victoria's office like she owned the place. The prosecutor walked her through the affair, the timeline, the plans Daniel had shared. "Did Mr. Cross tell you his wife was dead?" Alan Chen asked. "Yes. He said she'd died during childbirth." "When did he tell you this?" "The day after the delivery. He called me from the hospital and said Victoria was gone." "Did you believe him?" "I had no reason not to. He was crying. He sounded devastated." Sophie's voice cracked. "I thought I was comforting someone I loved through grief." "When did you learn Mrs. Hale was actually alive?" "When the police arrested us. Daniel's lawyer mentioned locked-in syndrome, and I didn't even know what that meant. I had to look it up." "Did Mr. Cross tell you about the second baby?" Sophie nodded. "He said there was a twin, but it wasn't his. That Victoria must have had an affair. Did you believe that?" "I wanted to, but it didn't make sense. Victoria was so focused on work. When would she have had time for an affair?" Sophie looked at Victoria for the first time. "I was lying to myself. About everything." Caroline West's cross-examination was brutal. "You're testifying against Mr. Cross in exchange for a reduced sentence, correct?" "Yes." "So you have a vested interest in making him look guilty?" "I'm testifying because it's true." "Or because the prosecution offered you a deal too good to refuse?" "I'm testifying because I helped him do terrible things, and I need to own that." Wes pressed harder, trying to paint Sophie as an unreliable witness motivated by self-preservation, but Sophie didn't crack. She admitted her role, accepted responsibility, and stuck to her story. When the prosecution rested, the jury looked convinced. Then came the defense's turn. Caroline West called a psychiatrist who testified that trauma could create false memories, that Victoria might believe she remembered conversations that never happened. The prosecutor dismantled him on cross, pointing out he'd never examined Victoria and was testifying based purely on theory. West called Daniel's friends, who testified he'd been a devoted husband, that the marriage seemed happy, that Victoria was difficult and demanding. The prosecutor asked each one when they'd last spent time with the couple. Most admitted it had been over a year. None had known about Sophie. West tried to paint Daniel as a man making impossible choices under extreme stress, but it rang hollow against the evidence. On day 7, Victoria took the stand. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, reporters standing in back, cameras in the hallway waiting for her to emerge. This was what they'd all been waiting for. Alan Chen started with easy questions. Background, career, marriage, history, establishing Victoria as a credible witness. Then they got to the delivery. "Walk us through what happened after your daughter was born," Chen said. Victoria took a breath. "I started hemorrhaging. There was a lot of blood, very quickly. People were shouting. I remember thinking very clearly that I was dying." "What's the last thing you remember before losing consciousness?" "My husband standing in the corner watching the nurses clean our daughter. Not looking at me, not concerned about whether I was okay, just making sure the baby was perfect." "Objection," West called. "Speculation about what my client was thinking. I'm describing what I observed," Victoria said calmly. "He was looking at the baby, not at me. That's fact." "Sustained," Judge Howard said. "The jury will disregard the witness's interpretation of Mr. Cross's thoughts." Chen continued, "What happened after you lost consciousness?" "I woke up. Except I didn't really wake up. I was aware, but I couldn't move, couldn't open my eyes, couldn't speak. I heard a doctor say time of death, 11:47 p.m., and I tried to scream that I was still there, but nothing worked." The courtroom was dead silent. "Then what?" "I heard my husband and his mother in the hallway discussing how to divide my assets. Life insurance, company shares, the penthouse. Evelyn said we needed to move fast before my parents could contest anything." "How did that make you feel?" "Objection, relevance, overruled. The witness may answer." Victoria looked at the jury. It made me feel like I'd married a stranger, like everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. Chen walked her through the 30 days. The conversation she'd overheard, the plans that unfolded, the moment she learned about the twin and heard them plotting to sell her. "Did you cry?" Chen asked. "Yes." Tears ran down my face, but I couldn't move to wipe them away. The nurse saw them, and that's when they started to suspect I might be conscious. "Mrs. Hale, is there any doubt in your mind about what you heard during those 30 days? "None. I remember every word." Caroline West's cross-examination started gently. "Mrs. Hale, you've been through significant trauma. Is it possible your memory has been affected?" "No." "You're certain, even though you suffered oxygen deprivation during the hemorrhage?" "Dr. Morrison testified my brain function was normal. I'm certain." West shifted tactics. "You installed a nanny cam in your home 6 months before the delivery. Why?" "I suspected my husband was having an affair." "So you were spying on him?" "I was protecting myself by secretly recording conversations in your own home." "It's my home. I'm allowed to record anything that happens there." "Did you tell your husband about the camera?" "No." "So you were conducting surveillance on your spouse without his knowledge?" "I was gathering evidence of infidelity, yes." West smiled like she'd scored a point. "Isn't it true you'd been planning to divorce Mr. Cross before you got pregnant?" Victoria paused. She and Jennifer had discussed this question, knew it was coming. "I thought about it," she admitted. "The marriage wasn't working." "But then you got pregnant and decided to stay." "I wanted my child to have a family. Even though you didn't trust your husband, even though you were spying on him, even though by your own admission the marriage wasn't working." "Yes." "Isn't it possible, Mrs. Hale, that you've constructed a narrative that paints your husband in the worst possible light because you were already planning to leave him? That you're using the locked-in syndrome as an excuse to destroy him?" Victoria leaned forward. "I heard him agree to sell my daughter for $50,000. There's no narrative construction there. Those are his words, on tape, discussing trafficking our child. A conversation you only have because you were secretly recording your own home. A conversation that proves he's a criminal." West tried a few more angles, suggesting Victoria was vindictive, that she'd manipulated evidence, that her testimony was colored by bias. But Victoria didn't break. She stuck to facts, stayed calm, and let the evidence speak. When she stepped down, the prosecution rested. The defense put Daniel on the stand. He testified he'd been devastated by Victoria's supposed death, that he'd made mistakes in grief, that the conversation about the second baby was taken out of context. "I was overwhelmed," he said, his voice breaking convincingly. "I just lost my wife. I had a newborn daughter, and suddenly the hospital was telling me there was another baby. I panicked. I said things I didn't mean." "Did you actually plan to sell your daughter?" his lawyer asked. "Never. It was a momentary lapse set in stress. I would never hurt my children." The prosecutor's cross-examination was surgical. "Mr. Cross, when did you first have sexual relations with Sophie Lang?" Daniel shifted. "I don't recall exactly." "Was it before or after your wife got pregnant?" "Before." "How long before?" "A few months." "So while your wife was preparing to have your child, you were sleeping with her assistant?" "That's not yes or no, Mr. Cross." "Yes." "And when did you move Miss Lang into the penthouse you shared with your wife?" 2 days after Victoria's supposed death." 2 days. "Did you think that was appropriate?" "I needed help with the baby." "You have a mother. You have friends. You chose your mistress to help with your newborn daughter while your wife lay 3 floors up in a coma." Daniel had no good answer for that. The prosecutor continued. "When the hospital called about the second baby, you told them to put her up for adoption, correct?" I was confused. "Yes or no?" "Yes, but..." "And when your mother suggested a private arrangement for $50,000, you asked how quickly she could arrange it." "I didn't mean..." "Mr. Cross, do you know what child trafficking is?" "Objection." Caroline West was on her feet. "Inflammatory. Sustained. Rephrase." The prosecutor didn't need to rephrase. The jury had heard enough. Evelyn's testimony was even worse. She came across as cold, calculating, more concerned with appearances than with any moral implications of her actions. "I was trying to protect my son," she insisted. "By selling his daughter?" "That's not what I was doing." Then what were you doing when you contacted 3 private adoption agencies? Exploring options. For a $50,000 cash payment, Evelyn's attorney objected repeatedly, but the damage was done. Closing arguments happened on day 9. The prosecution laid out a clear narrative: conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted child trafficking, a husband and mother-in-law so focused on money they forgot basic humanity. The defense argued stress, confusion, misunderstanding, good people making bad choices under impossible circumstances. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, Victoria was in the courthouse cafeteria, unable to eat, unable to sit still. Jennifer got the text first. "They have a verdict." Victoria's hands went numb. "Already?" Fast verdict usually means they were unanimous. That's good for us. They filed back into the courtroom. Daniel looked gray. Evelyn sat rigid, hands folded, face expressionless. The jury foreman stood. "In the matter of the state versus Daniel Cross, on the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, how do you find?" "Guilty," Victoria exhaled. "On the charge of attempted child trafficking, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of filing false insurance claims, how do you find?" "Guilty." Down the line, guilty on every count. Daniel slumped in his chair. Caroline West put a hand on his shoulder, but he shook it off. For Evelyn, the verdict was the same. Guilty across the board. Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. Victoria walked out of the courthouse into a wall of cameras and questions. She stopped at the microphone the prosecutor's office had set up. "I want to thank the jury for their service," she said, "and I want every parent out there to know your children are not assets to be divided. They're not bargaining chips. They're human beings who deserve to be protected, even when that protection means standing up to people you thought you loved." She didn't take questions. Jennifer guided her to the car, and they drove away while reporters shouted after them. 6 weeks later, Victoria sat in the same courtroom for sentencing. Judge Howard looked at Daniel over his reading glasses. "Mr. Cross, you betrayed your wife in the most fundamental way possible. You attempted to profit from her suffering and tried to sell your own child. The law takes these crimes seriously, as do I." He sentenced Daniel to 12 years in federal prison. With good behavior, he might be out in 8. Evelyn got 7 years. Sophie, because she'd cooperated, got 18 months in probation. Victoria felt no satisfaction watching them led away, just exhaustion and relief that it was finally over. The civil case for the divorce was simpler. Daniel had no ground to stand on. Victoria got everything: the penthouse, which she immediately sold, full custody of both girls, all her company shares. Daniel's visitation rights were terminated. He wouldn't see Ava or Claire until they were adults and could choose for themselves whether to have a relationship with him. If Victoria had her way, that would be never. 8 months after waking from the coma, Victoria stood in her house in Magnolia watching Ava and Claire play on a blanket in the living room. They were crawling now, getting into everything, tiny chaos agents who filled her days with exhaustion and unexpected joy. Maria, the nanny, had become essential, not just for childcare, but for maintaining Victoria's sanity. She worked mornings while Victoria handled company business, then took afternoons off while Victoria spent time with the girls. The company was thriving. The media coverage had actually boosted their profile. The CEO who survived death and came back stronger. Clients wanted to work with her, investors wanted to fund her, and Victoria's team had expanded to 250 employees. She'd written a book too. Not the revenge memoir publishers kept asking for, but something more useful. A guide for families dealing with locked-in syndrome, advocacy for better medical protocols, personal stories from other survivors. The advance had gone to funding a foundation for coma patients and medical research. Her therapist said that was healthy, channeling trauma into purpose. Victoria just knew it felt better than drowning in anger. Patricia and Robert visited once a month, making the trip from Florida to spend time with their granddaughters. Robert had retired early, wanting to enjoy the time they had. Patricia had started a support group for families of medical trauma survivors. Neither mentioned the trial unless Victoria brought it up. They were giving her space to heal, which she appreciated more than they probably knew. On a Saturday afternoon, Victoria got an unexpected visitor. Rebecca Cross showed up with Jake, now 4 years old, shy and clutching his mother's hand. "I know this is weird," Rebecca said, "but Jake's been asking about his sisters. I showed him photos and he wants to meet them. Victoria looked at the little boy, Daniel's son, who'd done nothing wrong except have a terrible father. "Come in," she said. They spent an hour in the living room. Jake was sweet with the babies, gentle when he touched their hands, delighted when Claire grabbed his finger. He brought them toys from his backpack, things he said were his favorites that he wanted to share. "They're pretty small," he observed. "They'll get bigger," Victoria said. "Then they'll be able to play with you. Can I come back?" Victoria looked at Rebecca, who shrugged like the decision was Victoria's. "Yeah," Victoria said. "You can come back." They worked out a schedule. Once a month, Rebecca would bring Jake to visit his sisters. Not enough to confuse him about family structures, but enough that the girls would know their brother existed. It wasn't traditional. It wasn't what anyone would call normal, but Victoria had learned that normal was overrated. On the first anniversary of waking from the coma, Victoria held a small gathering. Not a party exactly, more like a remembrance. Dr. Morrison came, along with the nurses who'd cared for her. Dr. Chen, her therapist. Marcus from work. Jennifer Castellano. Detective Martinez, who'd stayed in touch to check on how she was doing. They ate cake and watched Ava and Claire destroy their slices with enthusiastic hands. "You've come a long way," Dr. Morrison said. "I wasn't sure you'd make it those first few days." "Honestly, neither was I." "What kept you going?" Victoria looked at her daughters, covered in frosting, laughing at something only they found funny. Spite, mostly, and the knowledge that if I gave up, they'd win. "That's as good a reason as any." Later, after everyone left and the girls were asleep, Victoria sat alone in her living room with a glass of wine and thought about everything that had happened. A year ago, she'd been trapped in her own body, helpless and terrified, listening to people destroy her life. Now she was free. Stronger than before, maybe. Definitely more careful about who she trusted. She'd learned things about herself in that hospital bed, that she was tougher than she'd thought, that she could survive betrayal and come out fighting, that love wasn't enough if it wasn't backed by respect and honesty. She'd learned that family wasn't always blood. Sometimes it was a nanny who stayed late without asking for overtime, a therapist who answered calls at midnight when the nightmares got too bad, a nurse who saw tears and knew it meant something. She'd learned that her daughters deserved better than what she'd settled for, and that teaching them their worth meant first knowing her own. The nightmares still came sometimes. Victoria would wake gasping, convinced she was paralyzed again, unable to move or speak. But then she'd hear one of the girls fussing through the baby monitor, and she'd get up, walk to their room, pick them up. The ability to move, to hold her children, to take action instead of lying helpless, that was everything. Daniel sent a letter from prison 6 months into his sentence. Victoria threw it away without opening it. She didn't need his apologies or excuses or whatever he thought he needed to say. That chapter was closed. Evelyn sent nothing, which was somehow worse and also perfectly fitting. Sophie completed her sentence and moved to Portland. She sent a card on the girl's first birthday. Victoria read it, acknowledged it, and filed it away. Some bridges stayed burned. On a random Tuesday 18 months after the trial, Victoria was at the office when Marcus knocked on her door. "There's a woman here. Says she needs to talk to you about locked-in syndrome." Victoria looked up from her laptop. "Is she a reporter?" "No, she says her husband just got diagnosed." Victoria had started getting these calls after the book came out. Families desperate for guidance, patients terrified of what was happening, medical professionals looking for resources. She always made time. The woman's name was Jennifer, different Jennifer, not her lawyer, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "They're saying he can hear everything, but he can't respond," she said, tears streaming down her face. "That he's trapped inside and there's nothing they can do." Victoria handed her tissues. "There's always something you can do. Talk to him. Touch his hand. Let him know you're there. He can hear you, even if he can't answer." "How do you know?" "Because I was there. I heard everything. Every word mattered." They talked for an hour. Victoria gave her resources, support group information, the name of specialists who understood the condition. She shared what she'd learned about communication techniques, about hope and patience. "Thank you," Jennifer said when she left. "I was ready to give up. Now I'm ready to fight." Victoria watched her go and felt something shift inside her chest. This was why she'd survived, not for revenge or justice or proving anything to anyone. To be here for the next person who needed someone to say, I understand, I've been there, and you're going to make it through. 2 years after waking from the coma, Victoria sold her company. It wasn't a failure, it was a choice. A tech giant offered $400 million, a deal too good to refuse and more money than Victoria could spend in 3 lifetimes. She negotiated protections for her employees, ensured the company culture would remain intact, and walked away with enough wealth to never work again. Instead, she started a new company. Smaller, focused on medical advocacy and support systems for trauma survivors. It would never make the kind of money DataSync had, but that wasn't the point. The point was using what she'd learned to help other people survive their own nightmares. She hired Sophie Lang. That surprised everyone, including Sophie. I don't understand, Sophie said when Victoria called with the offer. After everything I did, you made mistakes. You owned them. You're trying to be better. That's more than most people manage. Victoria paused. And I need someone who understands what it's like to be on the wrong side of a betrayal. You know both perspectives now. Sophie took the job. They weren't friends, probably never would be, but they worked well together. Sometimes redemption looked like that. Awkward and imperfect, but functional. Ava and Claire turned 3. They were walking, talking, tiny people with distinct personalities. Ava was cautious, analytical, always thinking before she acted. Claire was impulsive, creative, diving into everything head first. They had no memory of the chaos that surrounded their birth. Victoria intended to keep it that way for as long as possible. She'd tell them eventually, when they were old enough to understand, she'd explain about their father, about what happened, about the choices she made to protect them. But for now, they were just kids who loved dinosaurs and finger painting and bedtime stories. On their 3rd birthday, Jake came to the party. He was 7 now, getting tall, still sweet with his sisters. He brought them matching toy trucks and taught them how to make engine noises. Rebecca stayed too, comfortable now in Victoria's house, comfortable with the weird blended family situation they'd created. You think he knows? Rebecca asked quietly, watching Jake play with the girls. About Daniel? Yeah, probably not. But when he asks, I'll tell him the truth. Age-appropriate version, but truth. That his dad tried to sell one of his sisters. That his dad made terrible choices and is facing consequences. Rebecca nodded. Better than my version, which is, your dad's an asshole. Victoria laughed. It felt good. 5 years after the trial, Victoria was invited to speak at a medical conference about locked-in syndrome. She stood at a podium in front of 300 healthcare professionals and told her story, not the sensational parts, not the trial or the betrayal, the part about being conscious and trapped, about how the nurses who talked to her like she could hear them made all the difference, about how small acts of dignity mattered when someone was completely helpless. You can't always save them, she said, but you can always see them. Treat them like the human beings they are, even when they can't respond. Because somewhere in there, they're still present, still aware, still hoping someone will fight for them. The standing ovation surprised her. Afterward, a doctor approached. My mother had locked-in syndrome 30 years ago. She didn't survive. But hearing you speak, it helps knowing she wasn't alone in there, that we were doing the right things even though she couldn't tell us. Victoria hugged her, tight. This was the work now. Not building companies or fighting legal battles, but building bridges between the helpless and the people trying to help them. 7 years after waking up, Victoria met someone. His name was Marcus, different Marcus, not her former assistant, and he was a widower with 2 kids. They met at a school function when Ava and Claire started kindergarten. His daughter and Claire became instant best friends. He knew who Victoria was. Everyone in Seattle knew the story by now. But he didn't treat her like a victim or a survivor or a cautionary tale. He treated her like a person. Their first date was coffee while the kids were at school. The second was dinner. The third was a movie neither of them paid attention to because they spent the whole time talking. I'm not looking for someone to save me, Victoria said on their 4th date. I already saved myself. Good, Marcus said. I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who thinks you're remarkable and would like to see where this goes. I come with baggage. Everyone does. Mine includes a dead wife I still miss sometimes and 2 kids who need more attention than I know how to give. Mine includes twins, a traumatic past, trust issues, and a tendency to work too hard. Sounds like we're both disasters. Complete disasters. Want to be disasters together? Victoria kissed him. Yeah, I think I do. They took it slow. Neither was in a rush. They'd both learned the hard way that fast and intense didn't mean real. But slow and steady, built on honesty and respect and genuine affection, that had potential. 8 years after the trial, Daniel was released on parole. Victoria got the notification from his parole officer. He'd served 8 years of his 12-year sentence, gotten out early for good behavior. The news hit her harder than she'd expected. He's not allowed to contact you or the girls, Jennifer reminded her. Violation means he goes back to prison. I know, but he's out there, walking around free. He's not free. He's on parole for 4 years, can't leave the state, has to maintain employment, weekly check-ins with his officer. That's not freedom. It still felt wrong somehow, like the scales hadn't balanced. But Victoria had learned that justice and fairness weren't the same thing. Justice was what the courts decided. Fairness was something you made peace with on your own. She hired extra security for a while, just in case, upgraded her home alarm system, made sure the girls' school knew about the restraining order. Daniel never showed up. According to his parole officer, he'd moved to Spokane, gotten a job in sales, was living quietly. He'd asked about visitation rights and been told no, not while the girls were minors. Maybe when Ava and Claire were adults, they'd want to know him. That would be their choice. For now, Victoria was their choice, and she chose to give them stability, love, and the knowledge that they were worth fighting for. 10 years after waking from the coma, Victoria married Marcus in a small ceremony at her house in Magnolia. Ava and Claire were flower girls, ages 8, wearing matching yellow dresses they'd picked out themselves. Jake walked Victoria down the aisle because she'd asked him if he wanted to, and he'd said yes with the biggest smile she'd ever seen. Rebecca came with her new husband, a teacher who treated Jake like his own son. Patricia and Robert sat in the front row, both crying before the ceremony even started. Dr. Morrison officiated. Dr. Chen was a guest. Sophie sent a card but didn't attend, respecting the boundary they'd established. It was small and imperfect, and exactly what Victoria wanted. That night, after the reception and after the kids were asleep, Victoria stood in her backyard looking at the stars. Marcus came out and wrapped his arms around her. You okay? Yeah, just thinking about how different my life is from what I planned. Better or worse? Victoria considered. A decade ago, she'd been building an empire, married to a man who'd betrayed her, pregnant and terrified. Now she had a company that helped people, daughters who were thriving, a partner who respected her, and peace she'd fought desperately to achieve. Different, she said finally. But good, really good. She thought about the woman she'd been, trapped in that hospital bed, helpless and terrified. Thought about what she'd tell that woman if she could. You're going to survive this. You're going to fight back. You're going to build a life better than anything you imagined. And the people who tried to bury you, they're going to learn that some women don't stay buried. They rise. They rebuild. They become impossible to destroy. Victoria looked up at the stars and smiled. She'd risen, she'd rebuilt, and she was never going down again.